the future of if I continue to go down this road, if I gain twice the weight, if I get arrested twice the times, right? If I have twice the bad friends, like what my life looks like, it was unacceptable to me. I don't want to f around anymore. Like, you've done this long enough. I just felt completely fed up with myself. And mostly because I realized that everything people said was correct.
You're such a freaking badass, but in going back into your story, you were 85 pounds overweight, you were arrested 6 times, you were in drugs, alcohol, you barely had any friends, and now, homie, you sit here, a freaking badass that is in a beautiful relationship, that's so damn confident, and have a company that's earning revenue $100 million, I believe. What the hell were you able to do to your habits in order so that you can freaking show up now? And what are the habits you've actually had to ditch in order to be a freaking badass and go after that dream of yours?
I'll tell you something that I tell people when they always come to me and they're trying to lose weight, which is, they say like, Leila, I just can't be consistent. And I'm like, that's not true, because you do consistently overeat, right? And so I think that rings so true to me, because there were a lot of things that I did consistently that got me those results. And I had to then consistently do other things to get the results that I get now. But I think that for a very long period of time when I was making that change, a lot of people say, like, did you use positive visualization? And like, you're really like bringing all these like great feelings into, and I didn't have any of that. What I was able to channel or tap into was all these negative feelings that I had. And I was able to then say, like, I'm angry and I'm anxious and I have all this like angst inside of me. And instead of putting it into all of these things, I'm going to put it into things that are going to make my life better. The day after the 6th time I was arrested, my dad, they brought me to my parents' house, because whatever, they didn't know where my house was. And I think that was what was on my license at the time. And I woke up and the immediate feeling of like absolute dread, right? Just like panic. And I was like, oh my God, I don't remember what happened last night. What happened? And then I like looked to the nightstand and then there's like the arrest record. And I was like, I just remember like the worst anxiety I've ever had, like settling in, just feeling ashamed, just feeling honestly disgusted with myself. And I had to walk downstairs, so I was really thirsty. And my dad was sitting on the couch, and I sat down because I'm in his house. He obviously had to deal with whatever happened last night. I'm not gonna be disrespectful and just like leave. And I sat down waiting, just like thinking this is when he's gonna let me have it, right? Like he's just gonna like rip into me. And instead, I just remember he sat down, he looked at me, and he almost had like tears in his eyes. And he was like, you can do whatever you want. I can't control you. You don't even live in this house anymore. He's like, but I just want to tell you that I do think that if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to kill yourself. And I just felt so guilty, because my dad, he's such a good person. Like, he's just like the best person I know. And he's always been there for me. He's always encouraged me. He's always been a cheerleader for me when there was no evidence or reason to be. And I just felt horrible that like, whether it was, I think it then equated to like feeling horrible about myself, but I felt horrible that I did that to him. And in that moment, I went upstairs and then I got my stuff and I went home to my apartment, and I just decided, I was like, it wasn't like, what are you going to stop doing? It was, you are now a different person. Who you are today is no longer who you are tomorrow. You don't do anything like what Leila has been doing. Leila, who's getting arrested and drinking and hanging out with these people, no longer, that's not who you are. You are a new person. And I just remember saying that to myself. I was like, I have a new identity and I am now a new person. So what does this new person do? She goes to the gym every day. She doesn't eat like shit and overeat. She doesn't hang out with people who aren't going anywhere in life. She has a vision for her life. She reads. She doesn't like binge Netflix and go, watch movies till 3 a.m. She lives on her own and isn't surrounded by people who are, doing things that aren't productive for their lives. She gets good grades, even though maybe the college isn't what she wants to do. It's because it's a representation of hard work. And she works a lot and works really hard. And so it wasn't even like mechanically, how do I change all these habits, which I think I would probably talk more to now. In that moment, it was so much emotion of just feeling so fed up with myself that I said, I'm assuming a new identity. And this new identity, it's easy to evaluate what she does and doesn't do. And those habits just happen to come with it.
So how do you, in those moments then, move towards the positive though? Because you can have taken that moment, right, where you felt, I assume, shame and guilt around your dad, that you had been arrested again and that he is now tearful, maybe losing his daughter. In that moment, before you even decided that you were going to be a new person, many people will retreat. Many people will just take on that shame and that guilt and then drink more to actually numb that pain, or eat more to numb that pain. But you chose not to. What do you think that thing was that made that first decision, because I think it is a decision, right? That first decision to just say no more. Because I've heard you talk about your emotions and how much that negative voice can really talk to you about that you're no good, but you chose not to listen to it. And I was watching one of your videos, and in that you were saying about you have to ask yourself about your emotion. Is this actually true?
Yeah. I think what it was realizing that in that moment, everything that people did say about me, everything my dad was saying, everything that people had said to me up to that point about what I was doing in my life was true. And that was what was horrifying, is that I agreed with my dad. I was like, if you look at this, like evidence, if I keep going down this path, it would make sense that you think that I would die. I'm over drinking all the time. I'm mixing drugs and alcohol. I'm, literally like blacking out and not remembering where I am. I mean, like there's so many things that could happen, and I'm doing it frequently. And I think that it was the horror of, I think when you're young, you always think, it's not going to happen to me. It's going to happen to that person right there. And I think they call it like the soldier syndrome, which is like you ask soldiers that go to war, do you think that you could die? And they say, oh, I don't think I could die, but I'm really worried about my friend Tim who's coming with me. And I think it goes the same with everything in life. And it was in that moment that reality, or the not reality that I was living in, that I was still invincible in some weird way, and that the laws of nature wouldn't apply to me, it was shattered in that instant. And I realized that I actually could kill myself by doing that. And I think the fear of, wow, I'm not invincible. And if I don't actually take action, it's only going to continue to get worse. And I really thought about it and thought to myself, like, if I continue to do these things, I just continue to feel worse and worse about myself. And then the anxiety builds, and then you get into the circle of like, I drink more, I feel more anxious. To then not feel anxious, I have to drink more because I'm even more anxious. And it just spirals up. And I realized that there is no better time than now to break that cycle. And I think when I felt like I was faced with, honestly, my life, I was like, I don't want to fuck around anymore. Like, you've done this long enough. I just felt completely fed up with myself. And mostly because I realized that everything people said was correct. And I think that a lot of us, when we're in this like really dark spot, we push away the things people say that are bad about us. We were just talking before we got in here about comments, right? Something Alex and I have talked about is like the comments that hurt us the most when people say them are the ones that we know are true. Right? And I think that people were saying so many things to me. Oh, you're gaining weight. Oh, you're not doing this. Oh, you're just going to end up drinking all the time. You're going to end up like your mom. So many things. And I would push them out. Like, that's not true. That's not true. But then if you look at the evidence, I was like, this is true. And in that moment when he said it and I agreed with him, I was like, they're all right. And I don't want to keep doing that. Because I knew, I was like, are you going to be happy with this? 5 years from now, if you keep doing this? I was like, what am I going to be? Like right now, I think at the time I was 220 pounds. I was like, what am I going to be, 400 pounds? Like, where do you draw the line? And I was like, I'm drawing it right now. Because that is terrifying to me. The future of if I continue to go down this road, if I gain twice the weight, if I get arrested twice the times, right? If I have twice the bad friends, like what my life looks like, it was unacceptable to me. And I think that was really what motivated the change, was just the fear of what my future would look like if I didn't make it now.
Dude, that's so freaking strong, because I think a lot of things that I said in this type of space of like motivation and inspiration is like, what do you want to be? Who do you want to be? And like work towards it. Now look, there is something very true to it. So I actually don't want to dismiss it. But there's this other side that can be just as powerful. And you even said, it wasn't like I was saying, I want to fit into a beautiful bikini and go on stage and pose, right? Which is what you ended up doing and like, like crushing it, by the way. You looked amazing. But to go on that wasn't your motivator. And I think that sometimes if you have a motivator of, I want to get into a bikini, then something happens, an emotion hits, you feel badly or something, and then it becomes a derail. So
Yeah.
it's something strong to the fear. But how did you not let it cripple you or hold you back? Because sometimes, like, the fear of being 400 or 500 pounds sometimes can be quite a toxic feeling inside. So how did you actually use that as a beautiful inspiration?
I didn't expect to feel good. And I think that a lot of people ask me, how do you lose weight? How do you stay in shape? How do you keep building business? How do you keep going? How do you keep striving for more? And I think I just never expect it to feel good. And I think that I've learned that damn near everything in life that has been really, really freaking good for me has felt pretty awful at the time and has felt terrifying. And I've been incredibly anxious, but I'm either going to be anxious because I'm hiding from something, or I'm going to be anxious because I'm striving for something. Only one of them moves me forward. So it's like, you don't get rid of anxiety. That's just part of life. But it feels, you can at least create a positive association with it if it moves you forward. And so I looked at it in that way, which is like, I'm going to feel like shit no matter what. I feel like shit now. I feel like shit changing. At least one of them moves me toward a life that maybe one day doesn't feel so bad. And so I think it was actually not trying to avoid bad feelings. Of course you feel terrified trying to change. Of course it feels overwhelming. Look at what you've been doing. And I think that actually a lot of the reason that it's so hard to change is that people tell us that we need to do something about the feelings before we change. Mm-hmm. But it's like, what if I could change while feeling that way? And in that, I find relief because I don't have to feel great before I step on stage. I don't have to feel sure of myself before I go on a diet. I don't have to feel less than overwhelmed before I do a new business venture. I can feel all those things and still do them. And I find so much relief in that because it has led to me not having to try and control my emotions. It's like, I can't control my emotions. I can control my behavior. And ironically, the more that I just focus on my behavior, my emotions tend to follow.
Oh, that's so freaking strong. I've actually heard you've got some little notes here on like the steps on how on earth you make sure that you don't give into your emotions. And I'd love to go through them. And I believe that you used it as a frame of reference of like getting on stage. But I think that this applies to anybody because to your point, if your emotions are telling you like, hey, like slow down, or don't do that, you're gonna get really upset, or someone's gonna upset you, or someone's gonna push you around, or someone's gonna be, emotionally abuse you. Like most people will retreat. And you've got a bit of a formula that I love. So if you don't mind taking us through it. So you say that, number one, you ask, is it true? Number two, how then does it make you feel? And then number three, live life like as if you believe the thought was real.
I think, so the reason I like this framework is because I think that there's a lot of, and this is just my opinion, this is what has worked for me. I tend to like overanalyze, overthink, get caught up in my head. And so for me, I tend to place more importance on my thoughts and feelings than I think was healthy. And so for me, what it was is that I was basically treating certain thoughts and feelings like they were overly important. And because of that, I was getting really caught up in them and caught up in these stories that my brain was creating that weren't true. And so for me, whenever I feel really emotional about something, and it's usually fear, right? Fear of something, anticipation of something that could happen. That's usually where I go. I ask myself, well, is this true? How do you know it's true? And what that follows is basically, do you have any evidence for this thought, right? And then I ask myself, okay, well, is there evidence for the opposite of that? Is there evidence that it's not true? And I'll write it down on a list. And I literally do this when I'm really trying to work through something. And then I keep that list of all the reasons that thought is not true, or that thing that I'm fearful of is not true. And what I'm trying to do is like our brain when it's scared, and I'm not like some of the people that's been on your show. This is just what I have found. I feel like when my brain is freaking out, it tries to find all these things that could be a threat. Right? It looks at things that wouldn't be a threat and it finds them as threats. This is the reason why you shouldn't speak on stage. You see right here. And it's like, and it's like turning everything into something as a reason why I shouldn't do this thing. And so I try to ground myself in like, I create this list and I'm like, here's all the reasons why your brain is wrong. And I read the list over and over and over again to convince myself to stick with whatever it is, right? When I get really scared. And I think that then asking myself the follow-up question of what would someone who's not scared do? That reminds me that if I take action like somebody who is not fearful, eventually the fear will fade. You know, it's like, I'm scared of heights. I went skydiving, right?
Purposely to get over the fear of height?
I said, I'm not going to tell anybody. I didn't tell anyone that I went with that I was scared of heights at the time. I didn't like say it. I wasn't taught. I was like, I will go because I don't want that to stop me. And I blacked out because I was so terrified. But the funny thing was that in the air, yeah. And then when I like came out of the blackout, the parachute had been pulled and like I was, you know, in the air. And then it was really cool, right? But up until that point, I kept saying to myself, what would someone do who wasn't scared of heights? They would go and do the skydiving, right? And then what that allowed is that after I did it, I had evidence of why this thing is not scary. And then what that gave me is like, the next time someone asks me, I don't feel a sense of anxiety. And so it's like, that helps me take the first step, is just asking myself, what would someone do who was not scared of this thing? If I do that action enough, the emotion will fade. And I love that there's power in that. There's relief in it because I'm like, I know, and I don't expect myself to not be scared. I don't expect myself to not feel like I want to freak out. I don't expect myself to not get overwhelmed, maybe not even cry, right? But I do expect myself to follow through because I can control that. I can't control how I feel. But I do know, because time and time again, it's proven it to myself, that if I do it one time, it is 50 times easier the second time, you know?
I love that. Okay, so I'm in Leila's head and you're getting on the plane and you're like, okay, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. I'm not going to tell anyone, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit.
Yeah.
Some people, and again, I always try to I love breaking down people's stories and then go, what's the moment where most people stop? But then that person that is freaking successful doesn't stop.
Yeah.
So people may go, okay, I get it. I'm going to go, you know, if you're fear of heights, get on the plane. The moment though, that they're like, cool, open up the door. Yeah. That's when the heart starts, all the thoughts come flooding in that sometimes overtake all the work, right? The repetitive, the mindset stuff of that you've like really worked on. Maybe you've, like you said, you repeated all the things that, you know, you were going to do or that your mind was trying to trick you into believing. But in that moment where the door opens and the reality freaking hits, what is happening in your head?
Nothing.
Literally just
sheer fear.
So how the hell don't you then go, shit,
I just
I'm not going to do it?
So I'll give you another example. I go to talk on stage. Caleb knows this. It's like I hadn't spoken on stage in years, and it was like my first talk. And behind stage, what nobody knows as they're all talking to me is like my heart is like at 190, right? I'm like freaking the fuck out. I literally cannot, like no spit, nothing. And I'm about to go up in front of like 2,000 people. And as I walk on stage, I'm like, I think I might be having a panic attack. And all I think to myself is like, move, move, keep moving, keep moving. Just keep talking, just keep moving, just keep acting. Just keep doing the thing. And what you find is that whether you coax yourself or don't coax yourself, emotions go away eventually. Like literally it's like focus on what your body is doing, not on what your brain's doing. And then within, like when I was on stage this time, for example, within 2 minutes, I felt completely normal. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't actually have a full-blown panic attack. Like I thought I was going to. I like could barely breathe when I was talking. And the crazy thing is I watch that speech now and you can't even tell.
You can't tell.
You can't tell. Because I just kept thinking like, just act. Like, it's like, it almost feels like I'm just pretending. Same with the plane. It's like, just act like the person that's going to jump off this plane. And then like it happens. Again, this is just what's worked for me. But it's like, I find so much relief knowing that I don't have to think a certain way to make it happen. I just can move through it and eventually my mind will catch up and realize this is not so bad. And I think that's really what is happening. If I had to guess, it's like my mind eventually realizes like, this is not so terrifying. This is not a threat. You're not running from the situation. Because when you physically walk towards that situation, what am I signaling to my brain? I'm signaling this is okay. We can keep doing this. You don't need to run away from it. And I think that you just have to be able to do it once to see that it works. I think there's a quote that I heard that meant a lot to me, which was, fear is a mile wide and an inch deep. If you just take the first step, you're like, it's a fucking puddle. I can just skip through it. But I think most people think it's like, you know, the Bermuda Triangle.
Do you ever do you ever play like, what's the worst that can happen?
Yes.
Does that serve you? You find that that works for you?
I do find that works for me actually really well. Going to like, what is the absolute worst case? And then how am I going to deal with it if it actually happens? Now, I will say, going into the like skydiving, I don't know if I'd go skydiving again today, only because I don't know if I would want, like, there's a chance that you could just, you know, the parachute wouldn't pull and like you could die. So I'm like, I don't know if I want that risk, not out of fear, but out of risk. But I do think through what is the worst that could happen and how would I deal with that? Like, let's not when it happens, but then like, okay, what's the morning after it happened look like? How will you deal with the press? How will you deal with your spouse? How will you deal with your friends and family? Like, whatever the thing is. How will you deal with looking like an idiot on stage? And then I think to myself, like, it's usually not as bad as we think.
Talk to me about how then you actively stopped the self-sabotage. So when it comes to drinking, when it came to drugs, when it came to partying and going out late and getting arrested and all of that stuff, I assume that there are habits in that, right? And so you even said, you know, moving towards or like hearing the fear of what could happen, but how do you actually change, right? Because I love the idea of going, I'm no longer this person. Like, I freaking love that. That's so damn powerful. But then you wake up the next day and the feeling of maybe the shame or the guilt from your dad has dissipated a bit. And then you wake up the next day and it's dissipated more. By the end of the weekend, most people go back to drinking and partying and then getting in trouble again because they haven't changed their behavior. And the voice in your head can then trick you into doing things. Oh, it's fine. Oh, it's just... So how did you actively, step by step, like on a daily basis, what did you do? Or did you just freaking cut and stop completely like cold turkey?
I did in many ways, because I think that I did one thing really well.
What up, homie? I got something free and new to share with you right now.
How often are you visited by that negative voice in your head telling you that you're not smart enough, that you're not good enough, experienced enough, not fill in the blank? One of the most powerful things you can learn to do in life is to turn that negative voice into your bestie. And I want to teach you how to do that and so much more in my 4 Steps to Becoming Confident workshop. And guys, the most amazing thing is you can actually register for completely free for this workshop. So click the link on your screen and I'll see you on the inside.
Which is I was in an environment where it was acceptable to do what I was doing. And I took myself out of that environment and put myself in a new one where that was not acceptable. I found friends who would find that behavior unacceptable. You know, I lived in a place where that would be unacceptable. And so I moved. I lived in a house with 6 people. I moved out on my own, right? I then committed to having a job, which meant that I had responsibility, which made a lot of the things I did unacceptable because I wouldn't be able to have that job if I did those things. And then I got new friends who, if I was to act that way, they would not be my friend. I am all for all the things I do internally. But gosh, if we can help change by changing our environment, why would we not do it? You know, even, I mean, another example, I've done that later in my life is like, I sold my last company, Gym Launch, moved immediately. I was like, I don't want to be Gym Launch Leila anymore. I want to be a different Leila. And so I don't really want to do that in this house. Moved. And I remember that was the first time that I felt the power of my environment though, because I realized those voices in your head come up, right? And we get them all the time. But if your environment reinforces those voices and makes them louder, it is very hard to resist them. And I think that being able to engineer your environment is truly a skill. And I think you've mastered it. I mean, like, look how you've built your life. And I think that I am so much more intentional with it now. Make it so that your environment makes it easy to achieve your goals and hard not to comply with them. Like, really. Because if all of a sudden none of your friends drink, and they would find it, you know, say repulsive if you got drunk, would you drink? We have so much, like, other people have so much power over us, people that are close to us, that I think in many ways we can take advantage of that when we're trying to change. You know, even Alex and I, when one of us is trying to make a change, we tell the other person so that they can reinforce the behaviors we want and, you know, try to help us extinguish the ones we don't want. And I find it so powerful that we help each other with that, because it helps it go so much faster than if we're trying to do it on our own. It's sort of like, you know, when I used to be a personal trainer and I was trying to help other people lose weight, every time they did any kind of behavior that was a leading indicator of losing weight, I would clap for them, congratulate, you're amazing, send them gifts, like anything I could do to make them feel good and then attach positive associations with those new behaviors. And I think that a big hack for doing that, and without, you don't even need to form anyway, though, is just get around people where that's just what's acceptable. And that was really what I did, I think, in many ways, and I immediately after I moved out of that apartment into my own, then I moved to California and got a whole new group of friends. Everyone's into fitness. Everyone's into, learning business, trying to figure out how to make money, trying to figure out how to better themselves. And that's who I surrounded myself with. And the things that Leila, who got arrested 6 times, did would not have been acceptable to those people,
So powerful. Did you also do anything on the negative side? So while you're like cheering yourself on or cheering other people on, when they did something amazing, did you do anything on the opposite side? I don't like to use the word punishment, but a negative act or anything?
I think until very recently, I beat myself up so much if I didn't do what I wanted to do, that was enough for me. You know what I mean? I don't think that I've done it so much for other people. I tend to look at it like, rather than, there should be consequences for certain behaviors. But I think that oftentimes what you want is somebody to do something else, right? And often if they feel bad, like too bad, then it's harder for them to do that other thing. And so I try to provide an alternative. You did this thing. Next time in that situation, this is the thing I would like you to do instead. So that was what I would try to do with clients when maybe they wouldn't adhere to something. It's like, rather than like beating them up, I know they're beating themselves up, right? So what I would rather do is provide them with like, take these steps next time that happens, rather than the ones that you just took. And then figure out, is there a skill gap? Do you not know how to do that? Do you not know how to say no to food? Do you not know how to, I had one client that like, her husband, every time he went to McDonald's, he would get her food and she like couldn't say no because he brought her home food. And we realized it was actually like, she didn't know how to say no was the issue. And so sometimes within that, you find that when you give someone directions, there's a skill gap, and that's why they can't follow them. So I look at it as, how am I going to help this person change their behavior, rather than how do I want to make them feel bad? Now, there are instances where I think feeling bad can equate to changing your behavior, like when we do it to ourselves mostly, but that comes from a place of autonomy. I think when other people do it to us, we tend to be not react as well.
Yeah, 1000%. So when you're doing it to yourself, it's just then basically incidental negative voice in your head?
Yeah. I think for a long time, I was so scared of going back to that person that I was, that any action I took that was like any step, even sideways in that direction, I would just feel really poorly about myself. And it took a lot of time for me to undo that, because I think that that was how I stayed on a path so strictly for so long. Because I think I was so terrified of going back to that reality, like of ever feeling that way again, of ever being so, like having such low confidence, being so dissatisfied with my life, having such few like real friends. Like it was just, I look back now and I think like, gosh, I would never want to go back there. But I think I was so scared of it for a period of time after, like when it was too recent, that I just beat myself up if I didn't consistently move forward away from that.
And your confidence building were those steps, were in moving out of that house, it gave you a bit more confidence. In moving and finding friends that were more like how you wanted to be, gave you more confidence. Like what were the steps in order for you to build the confidence? Because that's one thing my audience really like, they want to make a change and they have a dream and they know where they want to go, but that first step or that continuous step, even if you make that first step, it's the confidence. It's always the thing that holds people back. So how did you build your confidence through this transition?
I think that most of my confidence just came from sticking with the commitments that I made to myself. Like the things that I told myself I was going to do in private that maybe nobody even knew about, being able to stick with those things. And that came from training myself to take action despite how I felt. So I know that when shit hits the fan or shit's really hard, I've got my back. And I didn't used to, And I think I had lost a lot of trust with myself, because I actually think that when I think of confidence, I almost think of trusting myself. That makes me feel confident, to know that I can trust myself, to do something hard or to do something that is hard in the moment, but best for me in the long term. And I think that that confidence came from training myself on how to keep those promises and how to stick with the commitments. And that just took time. It takes repetition. It didn't take months, it took years, because think about how many years I wasn't going in that direction. And so I had to undo that and create new memories that I had within the context of my relationship with myself. And I think it still took, a lot of time, because I think what often happens, right, is that you're so far in one direction and then you go so far in the other direction. And I think that many times along that path, many people would have looked at me and not understood why I wouldn't have been so confident yet. And I think that that's just because I would keep the promises to myself, but I still had this feeling like I was never good enough. Like I could always be better, right? Which I think is good because it keeps you striving. But I think I wasn't able to mitigate the downside of that, which is you do pretty well, right? Like it was like being a friend to myself. And I think what I've had to learn to be able to actualize the confidence that I have earned is how to be a friend to myself and almost be like, look at the things that you have done. Because I think I've always been really cognizant of I've never wanted to have, I have an aversion to people who have huge egos, right? I've never wanted to be that person. And so it's I probably err towards insecure versus confident. But now I think I've landed in a place where it's a very good middle ground where I feel like I am confident. I don't have an inflated ego. You can take the actions, you can keep the promises to yourself. But then what are the stories that you tell yourself about why you kept those promises? I think that for a while, I looked at other people and said, you're all the reasons why that I've been able to achieve these things. And I took literally zero credit for anything. And I did that for a really long time in my life. And then I realized it's not like it's all of you are the reason. It's not that I am the reason. It's that we together are the reason. It's helped me balance insecurity and ego.
I think sometimes the ego serves us. I actually think the ego is there to protect us, right? It's like going on stage. It's like, if you're scared, it's like the ego's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Because it wants to protect you from getting embarrassed, freezing, right? So I kind of have a newfound relationship with my ego because I kind of now treat it as my friend, like my homie. It is just there to support me. And when I say support, it's almost to warn me with the red flags that maybe I don't see. Right. I don't listen to it. I just look at the red flags. So
observe.
Almost observe the ego and say, what is it showing you? And or ego or negative voice, whichever one. And it's what is it trying to say? Maybe it's true. Maybe you are about to go on stage and fall on your face, Lisa.
Right.
Okay.
You didn't practice.
Right. What are you going to do? Exactly. Yeah. And it then became my homie that's now allowing me to come up with a game plan so that when I go on stage, I have ideas. So if I freeze, I've got a backup plan. And the backup plan was laugh, by the way. That was my backup plan. Just laugh. And to your point, once you're able to say, okay, it's not an inflated ego. It's almost like, I think inflated ego is the blindness to to your skill sets. Mm-hmm. But I think most people that I know suffer from the opposite, where they don't even have the confidence to be able to say, I can do this. So you actually said earlier where you didn't believe you were good enough. Do you believe you're good enough now?
I believe I can do the thing. If I put in the same reps that anybody else who's achieved something has put in, then I believe I can achieve it. So I think I just look at it like success is not biased to who takes the actions. You can be insecure and inexperienced. If you take the actions of somebody who is not, you can still have that thing. And I think that's where I find a lot of my confidence is, I mean, I used to say this all the time, but I was like, you just outwork your self-doubt. It's like, I look at what somebody who is successful in something does, I do that amount and then more. And I feel extra certain.
Just in case.
Yeah, I'm not perfect. I still have so many areas that I think it's funny because it's like I am secure in areas that I used to be insecure in, right? But then it's like you expose new areas if you're trying new things. And I think now I have a different relationship with insecurity, which is it's probably just pointing to an area that I have less experience with. Of course I feel insecure if I've never built a private equity firm before. I've never built a private equity firm. But I do have a lot of experiences where I've done things before where I didn't have experience. So I do have more of an ability to look at the transfer of skill, of like, look at the 5 other times where you had no experience in something and you've been able to do it anyways. So that gives me a sense of comfort, but I can still feel kind of insecure. I just don't look at it like a bad thing, and I also don't let it deter my sense of self-confidence. I can have confidence in the fact that I can achieve things I haven't done. I can feel insecure in the fact that it's a new environment, it's a new condition, and there's a lot of unknowns that I'm just not aware of. Does that make sense?
Yeah. God, I love that idea of I can absolutely be insecure and confident all at the same time. I can be confident that I'm still going to move forward no matter how insecure I am.
Yeah. It's like,
That's
I really
so
just
strong.
don't
I
feel
love
like
that.
they both coexist.
Yeah. That's so freaking cool. Okay, so as you start to evolve, as you start to really develop your confidence, you start to build yourself, you start to move away. Like, I love all those building blocks that you do. Many people, and myself included, if you meet the wrong partner, it can absolutely end up derailing the person that you've built yourself up to be. And the amount of my audience that have built their confidence and then found a relationship that was really toxic, that actually then destroyed their confidence.
Yeah.
And now they actually almost don't know how to get it back. When you started on the dating game, did you worry about that? And were you thinking about your confidence and the type of person you would end up with?
Yes. I wasn't thinking about, I wouldn't say my confidence as much as wanting to be with somebody who made me better. That was really what I was focused on. I think I was focused on, I want to find somebody who amplifies who I am, who doesn't suppress who I am. That was super important to me. And I think that I had been in many relationships where the men that I had dated, I had many good relationships. I also had a few that the people that I dated never wanted me to shine any brighter than I did that day one, right? And I think that that was like a thing that made them feel more secure. But I just don't fuck with that. Like, I'm like, no.
What did that look like, if you don't mind going a little deeper?
Very controlling. So I'd be with friends and, you know, maybe not text them back for 30 minutes and then they'd show up, you know, and then I'm like, yeah, this is weird. But I think I was also younger and I was probably very caught up in the emotions of the relationship. And I think I was probably more focused on the emotions that I felt, the like caught up in like lust and love, rather than, is this the right partner for me? Are they making me better? Is this somebody I could build a really epic life with? Like, I wasn't asking myself the right questions. Do you love them? Yes. You know, love is, in my opinion, not enough. So I had, you know, dated a few people prior to Alex whom expressed that they wanted me to talk less.
They actually said that to you?
Yeah.
Talk less?
Yeah. If you could just talk less, that would be great.
Is this considered an actual boyfriend or like someone that you're kind of dating?
3 months dating the person and they say that. Yeah. So I've had multiple instances of that, which there are, I think, lots of transactional relationships where that is what somebody is willing to do to be with that person. But that's just not me. So yeah, I just wanted the opposite of that. I just wanted to feel empowered.
What did you say in that moment when he said that to you?
I said, I don't think this is the right relationship for me.
Oh, so that was like the breaking point.
Oh yeah, I've never had a problem walking away. I think I was very lucky to have a father who treated me very well and who I saw treat women very well. And also not let women walk on him. Like, I think it could go either way, right? Like, we can all suppress partners. And so I think I just realized, as soon as I emotionally matured and realized that like love and lust are not what build a great relationship, then I realized what I really wanted. And I was like, I want a partner, a life partner. I don't want like just a husband. I want a partner. And I want somebody who makes me better and who I can make better. You know, it wasn't a one-way street. I think it's a two-way street, and you can't wish for somebody to make you better, because if you're not the kind of person who can make them better, you're not going to get that person.
And if you're not looking to make yourself better at the same time, and you're just leaning on your partner, that ends up being a disaster as well.
100%. Yeah.
So as you started to date, I heard you even say like you're like, it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
So this is before you met Alex.
Yeah.
If you don't mind taking me through that,
Oh,
the
yeah.
idea, because I love the notion, because it's always like, you even said it earlier, right? Love isn't enough. So how do you know when they're actually the right person? Because a lot of people, myself included, when I was a teenager, like I confused love and lust and attraction, and also insecurity. So I was so insecure because no guy liked me, because I was always picked on and bullied and for my looks, that finally when I found a guy, it was like I put so much value in that, and he would tell me, I love you, and he would say all the things, but it was definitely a lot of internal manipulation. So how did you then, when you started to go out and really figure out who's the person that's right for me, did you put like a list of things together of what you exactly were looking for?
Yeah, so I'll tell you exactly what I did, which was I read, it was one of Tony Robbins' books. It was like Unleash the Power, something. And they had a whole chapter on finding a spouse. And I'm like 21 at the time. And I was like, I should make this. And so I made this list of all the qualities that this person would have, what it would look like, what they would look like they do, what do they, it's like be, do, have, whatever, that whole thing. And then what are your non-negotiables? Meaning if they don't have one of these things or have one of these things, you would say it's a no-go. And so I had about three pieces of paper that had writing on it describing this person. And I would read it and think like, what do they look like? How do they act? Like I would just kind of envision. And I remember I tell my manager at the time, when I was at 24 Hour Fitness, that was when I started. And he was like, amazing. He's like, it's a numbers game. And I was like, what? He's like, just like you learned how to sell here, and you understand like it's a certain amount of prospects to a certain amount of that convert into clients, and he's like, it's the same thing with dating. He's like, you've got to apply the same thing. And I was like, I get that. I had just learned that and gotten really good at it. So I was like, amazing, I can do that here. And he's like, and guess what? Like, you'll get so much better at your work if you can go on dates with strangers. And so it was funny because I think he saw the benefit in that. And I was like, that is amazing. I see that correlation absolutely. And so I dedicated myself to like, okay, well, how did I reach out to leads when I was a personal trainer and I'm trying to get clients? Every day at lunch, all I did was call all the leads instead of eat lunch. So instead, I got on Bumble and I just swiped for dates on Bumble. And the cool thing about Bumble is that obviously at the time, I don't know what it is now, but only a girl can message a guy. So then that automatically creates a filtering system because I don't have a bunch of like, penis pics coming at me like Tinder. And so what I did is I did that and I said, I will dedicate myself to going on one date a week until I find like a boyfriend. I wasn't looking for like a husband at the time. I actually didn't see myself getting married until I was like the age I am now. So you never know. But I committed myself to one date a week. And then that's what I did. I literally just was like, just see what's out there. See if that changes the list you have. See if you feel differently about people after. And at the worst case scenarios, you become way better at talking to strangers, which will also make you more money because you're in sales. And so I went on one date a week and I did that for, I want to say it was like between 16 and 18 months.
Oh, wow.
Until I met Alex.
Every week?
Oh, yeah. Now, there were some people I went on multiple dates with. Sure. So there's that. But it was really bad. I mean, it was like a lot of dates. And there were such bad dates and such just like awful. Like I had a guy one time like tell me he had like a VIP pass to a movie theater. He actually was sneaking me in because he didn't have money. And then we got like kicked out. I had one guy take me he wanted to go on a walk for a date, which ended up being a hike, which ended up being 4 hours long. And then we were like lost in the desert. Like I've had so many instances. But I just looked at it and I was like, it's a numbers game. And if I don't give up, I can find somebody who's the right match for me. And I remember thinking, I think it's more about, because I'd never want to try and change somebody I'm with, right? Like I want them to be somebody who wants to change for the better. I don't want to have to be the reason that somebody wants to change. It's like, oh, now I got her, so I got to work on it. It's like,
they will never sustain if you want to be with them for the rest of your life.
Exactly. So I'm like, I want to find somebody who has that themselves, like you call it self-propelled is what I say. And I think that just means I might have to look more. That was what I thought. I was like, these are a lot of things that I'm looking for. Because I had worked so much on myself that I felt like, hey, I want somebody who can kind of like be on the same page. And so it wasn't until I met Alex and then I met him and we went on our first date. I remember I went home that night and the only thought that I was left with after going on a date with him was, I just want to keep talking to him. Like, I'm so interested in him. And even if we don't keep dating, I hope we can be friends. Like, that was what I was really thinking, because I was just like, I just really liked being around him. And I went home and I looked at that list and I was like, I literally think he fits it all. And that was when I was like, you should keep dating this guy. And it was the same thing that we talked about earlier, which is I made a decision ahead of time what I was looking for. So if I got on a date, I went on dates with, guys with, it's Newport Beach. They had tons of money, flashy, this and that. But they just wanted some chick that could look cute. You know what I mean? And that didn't fit what I wanted. I think that oftentimes, it's like, what's the question? Are you the person that the person you're looking for is looking for?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's one thing that we can't be blind to is, does the person we want us back? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was really cognizant, I was really self-aware enough of where I was at. It's like, I'm not going to find somebody who's like got it all figured out, because I don't either. But I'm like a really fast work in progress right now. And so I want somebody else who is. And I feel like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, 1,000%. I love that. So when you meet Alex, he's a very, I want to say, strong man.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily just mean physically, but like his presence.
Yeah.
I would label him as an alpha male.
Yeah.
But I also think of you as an alpha female. When you entered the relationship, were you at all concerned about losing your confidence or your independence, or just really like how you really freaking show up? Because you show up with like energy and dominance, which I freaking love, girl. But many women, if they're with someone strong, over time, it can actually diminish them.
I made it a goal not to be diminished, because I think many people around him do get that way. And I looked at it as an opportunity to become more confident, stronger, and a better version of myself, because I didn't blame him anytime we were in a room and people didn't hear me. And I think that a lot of women do that. And I am not saying that I'm right at all, but what worked for me, and what I'm actually really fucking glad that I did, is that I didn't say, I wish he was quieter. I wish Alex wouldn't talk so much. I wish he wasn't going to be so powerful. I said, what can I learn from him? I am so grateful that I'm married to somebody that I can learn so much from. And I've learned so much from him about that. Like, he has made me so much more confident and powerful because I get to learn from him. He is very confident. And in so many ways, when I met him, I admired that so much about him. I was like, he's way more confident than me, for sure. But I was like, there's no better way to become more confident than to marry somebody who is. And I really have taken so much from him in that way.
Did you know how many people do the opposite though?
I know.
So it's literally just the conscious goal. So in those moments where maybe you're in a room and he's very loud and people aren't listening to you, maybe they're ignoring you, whether it's business or not, right? Other people have had the same example, whether it's with family, where you're or you're just in a room with friends and your partner may be very confident and they take over and then that you become small. So are you just repeating in your mind in those moments, like, oh, if this isn't about him, it's not.
I have two different thoughts. One is I will always think how I'm really proud of him and happy for him if he's getting more attention, more recognition, more credit for something, because he does work his fucking ass off. And he is a great person and deserves all of those things. I have that line of thinking, right? So that's happening. It's like proud, happy for you, wife, right? The other line of thinking I have is, if people aren't listening to you and they need to hear it from him, what do you need to change about how you deliver this message? And that is the only way that I think we've been able to do what we do together, is that I look at it like, how can I get better so that they don't need to hear it from Alex? They can hear it from me. And I have found so much growth in thinking that way. And I think every time we blame our partner, you're stealing an opportunity from yourself to learn and grow. And I think that took me a few years to figure out. But when I did, it just unlocked everything for me. And I feel like my growth just compounded because I realized that, like, the best of me and the best of him, we can give to each other, you know?
I love that. And the idea of wanting good things for your partner and as well as wanting good things for you, I think is very important juxtaposition to balance. Because to your point, it's like, if you do want good things for them, then don't try and bring them down, but then look at yourself. And this is what, one of the many reasons I love you, girl. Like, it's the full ownership part. Like, everything that we've been talking about today, you very much take full ownership. Not one point in this discussion ever have you pointed the finger at anybody else or anything else. How powerful is that full ownership to you?
I just like literally, I'd never want to be a victim. Even if I am, what good does that do me to say that I am? I give away my power. So I just look at it like, even if when there are situations where I am clearly a victim in some way, acting like one does nothing for me.
Do you have an example?
When I was a kid, I think that was like the hallmark example of my life, is that I lived with a mother who was an alcoholic and a drug addict. And in that house, you know, she would leave for weeks at a time. She was always drunk. And I have terrible memories for 7 years of my life. And I think in so many ways, I could have become a victim of that situation. I was a kid. I was young. I didn't have resources. But I didn't. Because I remember there was just one day, it was like she hadn't come home for maybe 3 days. And I was sitting in this room and I was calling her because I was worried that she was dead, honestly. And
how old are you at this point?
9 or 10. And she wasn't answering. And it was like 3 a.m. And I hung up the phone. I called her, God, 20, 30 times. And I sat there, and I don't even know where this thought came from, but I was sitting in that room, and I thought to myself, you just keep calling her, and like, you've done this before, like, nothing's going to happen. Like, she's not coming home. She doesn't care, right? She's not cognizant enough to care. And then I literally just had the thought. I was like, you must make the rest of your life so much better than this. And you do not need to be a victim of this situation. And I remember thinking, you can find strength in this situation. Do not let this turn you into someone weaker. I just remember thinking all these thoughts. I was like, I just remember, it was like, I have to make this worth it. You know what I mean? And I think that was applied with my life. It's like, you have to make life worth it. And being a victim does you no justice. Like, it doesn't help you. Saying I'm a victim of, you know, a terrible childhood, saying I'm a victim of a relationship, saying I'm a victim of being overweight, it has never helped me. And you know what I did? Is that I moved out of her house and I said, I'm not going to keep helping her. You know, even though I feel like there's all these things and reasons I should stay here, it's like, I'm going to do the thing that feels terrible and get out of this house as a kid, you know, and leave her on her own or whatever that means. And I think that has transferred to so many areas of my life, because that was the hardest thing that I ever did, is moving out of that house, because I thought she was going to die. And I loved my mom. And I look at that with every area of my life. And I see so many kids who go through such terrible things when they're kids. But the way that they react to those situations determines the rest of their life. And I think that just applies to everything. You know, are you a victim of your marriage? Are you a victim of food? Are you a victim of something really terrible that happened to you? You know, I could extrapolate out the things that I went through in that house, and it could sound awful, and people would think, how are you here today, right? But I don't, because I don't even like to talk like a victim. I don't even want to relive those things, because at the end of the day, I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for all the moments in which I'm in a room with Alex and people don't listen to me. I'm grateful for the times when I was overweight and people told me I'm fat, because they've all led to where I am now. And I think that we wish for strength, but we don't wish for the conditions in which strength builds.
When you said you don't like to talk about it, obviously we won't go deep because you said you don't want to talk about it. Okay. How have you then moved on? And this is actually a discussion that I'm finding a lot in social media these days, of everyone's talking about you must forgive, you must go back in time, you must heal a lot of the old wounds. And sometimes, though, there is power in not forgiving. and actually had a guest on, and that was the whole thing. She's like, no, I don't have to forgive. And I actually find the power in not forgiving someone. I find the power in not going back and, you know, looking at that. How do you heal that wound?
I think when I was younger, I was very angry. That's what led to, you know, getting arrested and doing all those things. I felt angry that I didn't feel like I had a mother anymore, if that makes sense. And I think I felt angry about a lot of things I just didn't think were fair, right? And at the time when I was younger, I think that talking through helped to a degree until it didn't. And it wasn't until I put all of my focus on just building a life that would be so dope that I would forget about the past and it would make it all worth it. Like, that was really what I focused on. It's like, how do you create such a compelling future that you don't even think about the past? I think that often we're so focused on the past, we can't even create a compelling future. You only have so much time to think about things during the day. And so I just found that I'm much happier focusing on the future. The weird thing is that the more that I have like built my life, I have, you know, when I was younger, like my dad, he put me in different therapy and all this stuff to talk through my mom's stuff. And I think more than anything, what helped me was I just accepted it. I didn't try to change it. I didn't try to like think through the things that happened and how they've affected my behavior now. I accepted those things happened. And I look at my behavior now as a decision I'm making as an adult. You know, I am not a child and I can make decisions. I can observe I have behavior that's not conducive to what I want, and I can change it if I want to. And I think that often, for me at least, what's worked is that I don't have to go back to the past to decide why I am the way I am, because I found that it doesn't make a difference to if I change it or not. In fact, sometimes it delays it because it's like, oh, I have to figure out the reason of why I do this thing in order to then change it. I just say, I do this thing, how can I change it? And I think that's worked well for me. And I think it takes, you know, for people who are younger, or maybe it's like the thing that happened is more recent. It takes time, because I think that when something bad happens, there's a long tail until you see the benefits that you can create from that thing. And I think that I was able to realize a lot of benefits, because I really believe that if my parents hadn't gotten divorced and my mom hadn't gone down that path and, you know, kind of just become a different person, I don't know if I would have been who I am today. I don't know if I would have had leadership ability. I don't know if I would have been able to lead myself, to lead others, because I think I would have been kept in a very different environment. But because she did what she did, I had to learn how to raise myself in many ways, you know, take care of myself. And I think that is something I've been able to recall at many times. And now I see the benefit of that. I see how it's benefited me in life. And so I truly am grateful for it. It's not BS when I say it. You know, I used to hear people say, I'm like, okay. You know, sure.
You don't strike me as a BS person, girl.
Right. Like, I'm like, oh, better than thou. But no, I am, because I've seen the benefits. And so I think that for a lot of people, they just they have to get through like the period of crap to then see the benefits of it and how it can transfer to many other areas of life if you're able to use what you learned for good.
How have you learned to build boundaries as an adult if, as a child, you didn't necessarily see that?
I think it changed when I moved out of the house with her. I think that I realized that not holding boundaries with someone else hurts them as well. You know, like me staying there, complying, allowed her to remain, it was acceptable. What she was doing was acceptable. And then I changed the environment and made it unacceptable because I left. And I do think that that helped her change at that time. Now I don't, you know, things have happened since, but I think at the time it was an initiation of change for her. So in terms of how that applies now, I actually think that I went the opposite, and I set really hard boundaries with people for a while, especially after I cleaned my crap up after getting arrested. And then I think that I went from having really hard boundaries to then being too much of like serving others. When we started a company, I felt like I had to serve the entire company, everything, everyone except for myself. So it was like really hard boundaries because I was scared that I was going to not hold them hard enough and then someone would be able to violate them. Then it was like they were too soft. And I think I've been able to find a nice middle ground now.
How did you then swing back to setting the boundaries? Like, at what point did you realize, oh, I've gone too soft?
When I realized that I felt resentful of decisions I had made. You know, like, oh my gosh, I'm taking meetings from 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. and I'm literally working and people won't stop pinging me. You own the company, girl.
And it's your phone, it has an off button.
It's your phone, it has a mute button. Right. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I have been the one that has done this, right? And so, you know, I think that's the common theme is it's always our responsibility. We always, you know, teach people what we tolerate. And I realized that I was doing that. And then I said, you know, I don't want to go back to what I was doing before. Because I think often it's like the pendulum swings here, and then we end up in the middle. I try to always now just fast track to the middle. But I didn't, you know, I went the soft way. And then I realized, you know, that's not sustainable. Though I felt like, okay, I have to be serving everyone. Well, if you're serving to the extent that you are resentful of others, then that tells me that I'm not respecting myself enough. I'm not giving myself enough of what I need and want. And I also don't need to have reasons for that. I can just do it because I want to do it. And so I think I've taken that, probably that was about 2.5, 3 years ago. I realized that about myself. And then I've been able to find a nice middle ground. It's like, maybe today I'm going to overserve the crap and I'm just going to extend myself. I can be like, today, nothing for Leila. Like, you don't get anything you want. But tomorrow I get everything I want. Or half and half.
Yeah, I love that so much because, and I'd be curious to know, did you blame everyone else first and then you realized it's your company? Like, I can't believe they're calling me. I can't believe they're doing it. And the reason why I ask is boundaries is just a really big thing when we're talking about building our confidence. Boundaries, I think, is just absolutely imperative in order to build your boundaries, because when you're building your confidence, you've got to start saying no a lot more. You have to start pushing back on people that may be crossing the line. And so when you're building those boundaries, initially, I had found myself going, but if they just didn't do that, then everything would be fine. Yeah. And then to your point, then I realized, oh, I'm now actually the responsible party for my boundaries.
Yes. I think that a lot of it came from I didn't know how to set boundaries without being mean.
Oh.
And I don't like to be mean to people. I don't like to make people feel bad if I don't have to. I really like to make people feel good. And so I had to find a way to set boundaries that didn't even just not make people feel bad, but made them feel good. Right. And so I found a lot of that with just the more I blame myself and the more I make it about me and that there's something, you know, it's my fault. I'll take that if it means that other people can feel good. Also accepting, like, I used to feel like I had to over explain if I wanted to set a boundary. And now I'll be like, I just don't want to do that. And they'll be like, what? I just don't want to. And I think that when I felt like I had to over explain, it was like, first I felt mean because I'm stressed when they're asking me. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. And the reason I don't want to is because, and then go into like over explaining. And now I'm just like, oh, I don't want to do that. And they're like, why? I'm like, I don't like doing that.
How did you actually train yourself to do that? Go from one to the other?
I just heard somebody say, you can want to do something or not do something and not provide a reason. And that, at the time, provided me so much relief because I'm an over-explainer. It's like I never want someone to take something personally, so I always want to over-explain it to them. But that is also a little bit annoying.
Like, for yourself or for them?
I think for both. And so I realized, like, I waste so much time worrying about what other people think of the boundaries I set or don't set. Or don't set. And now I think that I've just allowed it to be just like, it doesn't matter. Let people judge me. Let people misunderstand me. You have one life to live. You know what I mean?
How are you okay with being misunderstood?
Well, one, I can understand why so many times in my life I have been. Because I think, like, for example, like when I get nervous, I'm not myself, right? I'm not quite the same. I act a little bit differently. So like, even I remember when I first started making content, I felt like, gosh, do people not really understand who I am? And it's like, girl, like, look at yourself in the camera. Like, you're not acting like yourself. Of course they don't understand, right? And so I think one is like, there's many times where I'm like, I can understand why they wouldn't understand me, right? Like, this is confusing. Or it's not like anything else they've seen. Therefore, they don't get it, right? Like, if we're if they don't have someone to compare you to, for example, like people want to put Lisa in a box and compare you to something because it helps understanding wise. But it's like, if they can't find that comparison, it's really hard to get what you are and who you are and what you're about. And so I think, Alex said this to me one time. He said, I was saying something to him. He buys so many shoes. He buys like legitimately like 30 pairs of shoes a month, and just like always is trying on shoes to see which one's like the best shoe. And I was like, oh my God, another 7 boxes of shoes. I said something. And then I was kind of having a day, and I was like being a little down on myself, thinking like, I feel like I'm so weird sometimes. Like I was doing this thing and I said this thing and I sounded like such a weirdo. He said, Leila, look at this. He like points to this fucking pile of shoe boxes. He said, would somebody not weird be married to me? And then I just started cracking up, and I was like, no. And he was like, baby, you're weird. And I love you. And you know what? Normal, bland people aren't going to achieve what you achieve. You're a little weird, but that allows you to do what you do. And I was like, that's cool. And I think it's hard to understand. The more unique you are, the more that you try to do that people haven't done, I think the more you'll be misunderstood. Until one day you do it, it becomes normal, and then you make it understood for everybody else,
Mm-hmm. Dude, that's so fascinating how you've thought of like the reality of, oh, yeah, people are going to misunderstand me, but then also projecting forward to what that ends up looking like down the road.
Yeah.
That's so powerful. Okay, so if you don't actually mind it taking me down, like, so now you've been married to Alex for 7 years? Or you've been together for 7 years?
Been together 7, married 6, yeah.
Amazing. How have you guys been able to navigate both of your careers, both of your evolutions, both of your changes? Because a lot of my audience are changing, right? That's why they're watching this episode, because they really want to change. And sometimes it becomes very difficult when you're in a loving relationship to be able to do that in the way that feels right for you, not what's right for your partner, but what's right for you, and still support your partner at the same time.
It's a tough one. I always go back to this one saying that I do think applies, because there's so many times I speak to women and they're telling me these things their partner's saying. And I think to myself,
Negative things, you mean?
the game is won in the draft.
What does that mean?
Marriage is won in who you pick. I have a hard time with it, because I think that I think more people put more effort into their wedding than their marriage. More people put more thought behind what's my wedding going to look like than what is my spouse going to be like. Like really, I feel like we live in that era of vanity. And so it's hard for me to give that kind of advice, because if the fundamentals aren't there, if you hire an employee and they're not on board with the mission and they don't share values with you, all the rest, it's not really going to work, because the fundamentals aren't aligned. And so for me, it's like, if you don't pick somebody who can get on board with the mission that you have and can share the values, at least respect yours, I feel like it is very hard to do everything else. So for us, when we first got married and we first even got into a relationship, when we talked about what we wanted, we said we want to be able to grow together. That means grow individually, but in the same overall direction, because we have this mission together. So it's like, I'm growing here, he's growing here, but we're like holding hands along the way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's how I've always envisioned it, where I think a lot of people don't have that discussion of like, we both want to grow, but we want to grow in the same direction. So we still have, shared values, some shared interests. We have a shared mission, and they grow like this. And like, then you're too far apart. And so that was a discussion that it was very relevant at the beginning of our marriage, which was making sure that we engineered an environment where we can grow individually and together at the same time. And I think that's why it's not for everybody, but like why I've loved owning and being business partners while in marriage, because the thing we have together is the business. We get to grow in that together, learn how to make better decisions together, learn how to lead people together better, learn how to, talk and communicate together better as business partners. At the same time, there's Alex as the founder of acquisition.com and Leila as the CEO of acquisition.com that are growing in their own individual paths, right? And then Leila as a person, Alex as a person. And so I think that for a lot of people, it's really hard to help your partner grow in who they are if you don't have one thing you're growing together. I've just observed it. It's like when I see marriages where people are actually excited for their partner to grow, they also have like one thing. It could be a kid. It could be the house project they're working on together. It could be a fucking dog. They have like one thing that they work on together, that they get to grow together. Because I think at some point, it's like, if you're not working on something together,
it's not really a marriage.
What's there? Yeah. And so of course that husband doesn't want to support that wife. She's just growing away from him, you know? So it's like, does your growth benefit him in some way? And I think that that's a weird question to ask, but I think about that. You know, how I'm developing as a person going to benefit Alex? And I really do think about that. I'm like, how would this all benefit Alex? Things I'm doing for myself. And I'm like, here's how it benefits him. I can think of it. And I know he's smart enough to identify those things. And same with me and with him.
That's what I was going to say. I assume it's vice versa.
Right. And I think that the best is when the ways in which that you're each growing can then transfer into the one thing you work on together. And so then you can really actualize the benefits of each other's individual growth, because they're pouring it into one thing that you're also working on together.
And how have you then been able to balance, or maybe you don't balance, right, the feminine and the masculine in you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I have observed for myself, one, I don't think I think in feminine and masculine as much as I used to. I think I've tried to like almost divorce myself from those terms. When we say it, we really mean like softer versus like hard and driven, right? And so I think that for myself, being able to balance those two, it hasn't been about balancing. It's been about understanding what is beneficial for the environment. Am I at home alone with Alex after work? It's been a long day. Okay, well, masculine, powerful, driven, probably not going to be very receptive to that right now. Versus, am I at work leading a meeting with 30 people on it? Like, that's a time where I would like to call on some like driven, ambitious, masculine energy. And so for me, it's more about, I think if we're moving too fast, we conflate the two. And so work comes home because it's like you're working all day, and then you're like on the phone call on the way home from work, and you get in, and then you like forget that you're at home with your wife who like hasn't been at work with you all day, and she's like really excited to see you. And then you're like, blah, 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 and you like blurt all this stuff, right? And it's like, that's when like, I think friction occurs. But I think early on, I got some advice, which was like, just give yourself like 1 minute to switch hats between things. It's like, okay. And I think in the beginning, when you're trying to balance the feminine and masculine, you're trying to, basically it's like contextual, right? I think that within a given context, either one is appropriate or either mix is appropriate. It's when we carry it over to the next thing we're doing that it might not be appropriate. And I think that's where most people lack a skill, is that they don't have the skill of identifying the environment, saying this is what would be most conducive to this environment, and let me switch that hat right now. For me, it used to take me a long time to switch hats. And it would be like an hour, right? And then it was 30 minutes. And then it was 20. Now it's instant. So now I can go run a meeting with 20 people on it and go immediately into a one-on-one where someone is like very upset, and then go immediately into a conversation with Alex where we're talking about like the two of us in our relationship. And that took 5 years of practicing putting on and off hats. But I think in the beginning, we're just learning what all of that is, especially if it's like, say, it's a new relationship, or it's a new job, or it's a new, you get a promotion, or it's like your husband has a new job, or there's now a kid involved, or like, it's all that adds to the environment, it changes it enough that we have to learn. And I think once it cements, we can change hats a lot faster. But in the beginning, I think it's normal to not feel like you can balance those things, because I don't know if it's balancing so much as it is not being able to switch quickly. Because I think that's where a lot of the friction comes when you're trying to
Do you feel super self-conscious when you go to the gym, trying to work out in front of all of these strangers, worrying if they're eyeing you? Guys, I get it. When I first started working out, I had no freaking idea what I was doing. If only today's sponsor, Future, existed back then when I was just getting started. I mean, with Future, you literally have your own personal badass trainer right in your pocket, cheering you on and freaking kicking you in the butt when you need it. Future pairs you with a real-life personal trainer that will work with you to build a fitness plan that fits your freaking needs and helps you achieve your goals, not other people's. So whether your goal is to feel confident in a sexy swimsuit or have more energy to be a freaking badass, then there's an expert Future trainer who knows exactly how to help you get there. And for a limited time, I have a special offer. If you go to use my link, you will get 50% off your first month with a Future trainer. So go to tryfuture.co/Lisa to get started, or click the link below in my description or scan the QR code right here. Guys, give it a try and flex your confidence.
Be with a spouse and say you're both very career driven, and then you're like, you bring a lot of that into the relationship. It's like, we just forgot to take off our hats. That's all. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that. I've never thought about it being more environmental. That's super interesting. For me, it was always just like what I'm wearing.
Really?
Because like even the show, I don't look like this on a normal day, right? Like when I'm got a business meeting, I'm not dressed to the nines and with all my jewelry and my makeup and my hair. It's usually in a bun, scruffy, you know. And I realized, oh, when I really dress up, I feel powerful. When I sit up, I feel powerful. When I've got my hair done, I feel powerful. When I've got my jewelry on, like these are like my Wonder Woman cuffs, like mentally. That's how I feel. And then I was like, what would it be like if I did the opposite? Because I so much show up in my masculine most of the day, I found it hard to transition into my feminine again, because I had swung, that you mentioned earlier, because I was the stay-at-home wife for 8 years supporting my husband. Then when we started business, I swung really hard into the other way. And then it was like, well, how do I find a beautiful mix? Because I actually really love being soft. I love being in my feminine. And so I was like, I have to do something that's deliberate for me to be able to transition. And so that was why I was like, what if I did the opposite? So my getting soft is me taking my jewelry off, putting like my Wonder Woman pajamas on, my fluffy Wonder Woman pajamas, you know, taking my hair up or taking my makeup off. And that act of doing it almost becomes like a stepping stone, one by one, into going into my softness.
I see it as stimulus. The environment, the people there could be a stimulus. Your outfit could be a stimulus. It's like that stimulus signals this.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's super powerful. I love the stimulus idea. There was one other thing I wanted to ask you. How do you handle jealousy? And the reason why I ask is because that's, I think, very universal for a lot of us women to feel jealous or be triggered with jealousy if something happens to our spouse or our partner or a boyfriend that we're dating. And just knowing you guys, I mean, you're just freaking on fire, getting more, you know, followers and more famous, if you will. And I know that that comes with, I'm sure, a lot of, I'm just going to assume for now, that a lot more women are going to hit on your husband, if I can just be so blatant. It happened to my husband as Quest was growing, right? The bigger the company gets, the more successful the guy gets, the more women were just trying some stuff on with him. So have you had any jealous moments? And if so, how do you handle them?
It happens to both of us. I'll say two things. We talk about how we handle those things. So first off, if either of us, we talked about this in the beginning of our marriage, if anyone is trying to form a relationship with us or approach us in that way, and we start, the moment that we realize it, we're like, we'll just ignore them. We just cut off communication. So, you know, he'd be like, has it happened a few times to him where like a, you know, woman maybe is talking to him and then he's like, hey, I just want you to know it started to feel weird. So I've just cut off communication. And I was like, thank you for letting me know. Like, cool. And I'll tell him the same thing. It's like, hey, you know, this person was talking to me. They said this one thing that felt really weird, didn't feel right to me. So I've just ignored them since then. And he's like, cool, thanks for letting me know. So I think the first thing is that we've talked about it before. You know, it's not like an untalked about thing. I also, you know, I'll say in terms of like me being jealous, I think it probably happened more in the beginning of the relationship, which I'm probably does for a lot of women, especially if you're dating people. I would tell him if I felt that way. which was really hard for me. And so what I felt like I would do in the very beginning is, you know, there were a few times where Alex and I were in situations where I found it was always interesting. It was always older women felt like they could hit on him in front of me. I don't know why. And I realized that what would happen is I would feel jealous. Then I'd be mad about the fact that I felt jealous. Like, why do you feel, this is irrational. This doesn't make sense. I would
Mad at yourself.
yeah, I'd be mad at myself, argue with it. And then I would kind of like go cold. Like I wouldn't want to talk. I'm just like, ugh, because I'm embarrassed that I felt that way. And so I found for me, I can at least control the embarrassed part. I can't control if I feel jealous or envious or whatever, but I can control feeling embarrassed by telling him.
Most people would think actually that that's now you're embarrassing yourself more.
I have found relief in it because at least I'm being honest. And then I feel like if I'm honest with him, that at least makes our marriage better. So I'd be like, you know, when we were having that and she kept touching you and she kept doing this and like, I actually felt jealous. And like, I'm a little embarrassed that I felt jealous, but I did. And then he's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, I know, I felt weird about that too. Something, blah, blah, blah. And then it feels like a conversation rather than like a secret that we have to keep to ourselves. And that I found was very useful to me in the times that I've felt that way. And I think that I seldom feel that way because Alex and I have talked about it enough that we have, I think a great piece of advice that we were given early on is that when you're married, it's very important the situations you put yourself in. So I actually saw a video the other day of a guy who said like, I don't go out past 1 a.m. because like, what good is that going to do my life? He's like, what good shit happens past 1 a.m. for me? And I actually was like, I don't like follow this person, but I agreed with that because Alex and I talked about that. It's like, am I, you know, going to put myself in a situation where say, you know, I go to the bar with all these single girls who like love to be hit on by guys. I also know married women who like to get hit on and flirt with guys, you know, and maybe I can be friends with them, but I'll only hang out with them with Alex there. Because I also don't want to put myself in a situation knowing that I'm going to have to, one, be like fighting guys off of me. Two, Alex is probably going to feel uncomfortable because he knows I'm having to do that. And then three, it's like, is there a net benefit from this situation? So Alex does the same thing. He's like, okay, well, am I going to put myself in a situation where I'm going to be constantly having to fight off girls who are, you know, trying to get me to cheat on Leila? It's like, what is there going to be a net benefit to this situation or this environment that I'm putting myself in? So we talk a lot about that too, which is like, you know, making smart decisions in terms of like, we only have so much time and resources in our lives. Do I ever want to put myself in a situation where I feel like I'm going to make my marriage harder, not easier? And the answer is usually no, I don't want to do that.
What's the difference then between that or doing something because your partner demands it? Is it that you both agreed on it? Because as I was hearing the story, I think it's so freaking beautiful, but there is that other world where the partner's like, don't go out. And now you want to go out, but so now you're listening to your partner and you're ignoring what you actually want and you're doing it for them, and then you start to resent them, and then it actually starts to be almost like controlling.
Yeah. I will say that we've never spoken to each other that way. So I don't command him. He doesn't command me, right? We did agree on that in the beginning of like, how do we handle these situations, which I think is really important before you get married to talk about. Now, if you go into a situation and your partner says like, I don't want you to do that, I would probably take a step back and say, I really love and respect Alex. Why doesn't he want me to do that? He's somebody who I admire. He's somebody who I think is really smart. He's someone who I respect. And he is literally saying, I don't want you to do that. And then I'd be like, am I thinking the situation through? Like, am I being naive or ignorant to something that he sees and I don't? I think that's the first thing I would do. Is like, is there any part of what he's saying that is true? There's times where like, you know, I think you see, it's like maybe the partner sees something that you don't. And so I think that's a good thing to look at. Now, if you're saying, no, they're just completely being insecure in this situation, then I think I would think to myself, how can I, you know, say step forward in this situation, but also not make it harder for my partner than I have to. Maybe it's like, okay, he said he didn't want you to go out. Be like, maybe I really want to go out. But like, what if I, you know, text you every hour? And then the next time I go out, I text you every 2 hours. Or it's like, I text you when I leave, I text you when I come home, so you know I'm safe. Like whatever it is, right? Now, I think there's a difference because like, you know, there's definitely relationships that are like weird and like, you know, because like if Alex will leave and like that guy he's not a good texter. So it's like if he goes when he's with people, like I'm like, hope you're alive. You know what I mean? So I think it is all about expectations and like talking about that ahead of time. And we've never just been in a situation where we fundamentally disagreed on something like that. So it's hard for me to recall.
Well, I love that you've actually just established. I think that's really where it starts from, right? Where you establish before you even really get deep into the relationship. How, like, Tom and I call them the rules of engagement, right? What are our rules of engagement in our marriage? And do we agree to them? And then making sure that you identify what those are ahead of time so that you both are working in accordance, I think is super strong. And then there was that other piece that you said of like, it really does make a difference of how you see that person, right? You said, I respect him, I admire him, I look up to him, I, you know, want to listen to him. And so I think all of those points are a great way of assessing whether it's like, oh, if you respect them, if you really do cherish them and you think that they respect you back, then maybe there's something that you're not seeing. I think it's when it's they can be someone who can be either overbearing or toxic or just commanding, that's where it becomes, I think, very detrimental to the relationship.
Right. We have a lot of influence over the people that we're in relationships with. And if somebody is using that to make your life worse, I think that's different than you are making a decision that's maybe short-sighted and maybe they're looking at a long-term consequence of your decision. And then maybe you step back and say like, hey, maybe I'm not looking at the long-term consequences of this decision. Versus somebody who's trying to control you and you're looking at it saying, this is a good decision in the short and long term, and they're telling me not to do it.
Yeah, I love that. Being in the fitness industry, I'm assuming you've obviously gone to these like fitness events where a lot of women and guys, I mean, guys are just like shirtless, their muscles are, you know, bulging out, and then women are walking around in bikinis. And when we first started Quest and it was like really growing, I remember being very jealous about the women that were trying to hit on my husband, like initially. And I immediately went to myself. It's like, why are you so insecure, Lisa?
Yeah.
Like, you trust your husband, don't you? And I was like, the answer was yes, right? So, okay, I trust him. I know that nothing's ever going to lead to this. So why are you insecure when you see maybe a woman talking to your husband, they're flirting, you know, you can, even with the sound off, right? If you're from a distance, you can tell when someone's flirting.
Yeah.
So I went deep, and that actually really helped me build my confidence because I realized that I was almost pointing at the girl. And I think the reason is in my head, right, she's so beautiful, she's so, you know, she's tanned, and she's got like lovely boobs and, you know, all of this and like lovely muscles. And here I am in just like flat, a hairnet, pretty much all day, every day at Quest. That's what I was building our shipping department.
Yeah.
So I was just in a hairnet most of the time. And you've got to like food grade, you can't like wear makeup, and there's certain things you can't do. And so I just ended up realizing I started to feel shitty about myself, and it was because I wasn't putting in the effort. And that actually allowed me to look inwards and then build my confidence so that when it came to it, literally now, lady, you could send me a photo and be like, Lisa, I just saw Tom walking down the street, and look, I took a photo and his arm is around another woman. And if you send it to me, I'll go, oh, maybe she was crying, maybe like, you know, and I would never go to, oh, he's cheating. Now, look, I want everyone at home to know I have never been cheated on. So that is coming from a place of me being with my husband for 21 years and being able to say that. I understand if you've got a past where a guy has potentially cheated on you, and so now that becomes a triggering thing. But for me, looking inwards when I felt jealous was actually the most beautiful thing that I did.
I think that's a great piece as well. I mean, I've always thought to myself, like, if I am ever jealous of anyone, like, why? Do they have something that I want or that I don't think I have? Because I think that's really where it comes from, right? Because if you were to see if the other girl's wearing double hairnets, you know, you're not jealous. And she's got like, you know, not even flat boobs. She's like indented, you know, you're not feeling jealous that Tom's talking to her.
That woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so true, but that's the thing. It's like, it's in the comparison thing, right? And so I actually think when I was younger and insecure, I would look at things that I either wanted, and then it would make me feel bad about myself. But now I really get inspired. Like, I look at other amazing, powerful women, yourself, right? And I just get inspired by being around you. I get inspired by being around other women to see what's possible instead of it being a reflection of what I'm not.
Yes. I think one thing too is like, you know, even like openly, like if I see a very attractive woman, I'm like, wow, she's beautiful. And Alex is like, oh yeah, she's very beautiful. And if I see attractive men, I'm like, oh wow, he's very good looking. He's like, oh yeah, he's good looking. And like we can talk, you know what I mean? It's like objective versus like, I don't know, like hiding. Like I don't expect that now that Alex has been, that he's my husband, that he doesn't think other women are attractive.
Oh, I completely
And
agree.
that he won't look at, and I am with but I'm with so many women that do think that. Like my husband can't look at other women. He can't, I don't want him to talk about how attractive, and I feel like that is like, it's just the opposite of reality. You know what I mean? Like I look at other women and find them attractive. I'm staring at her ass. You know, me first, you know, because I think I look at other women more than men, you know what I mean? And so I also just think a lot of people argue with reality in that. And then it creates more jealousy because you're like, he looked at her. It's like, of course she's beautiful. You know, like that's what she wants. She wants people to look at her. And like, you want people to look at you too. And so
I think it might be controversial though, because many people have been burned, right? Many people have been burned by the guy that ends up looking at the woman and then sleeping with her. So I completely understand that if you've got that experience.
I understand it. I just don't want people to bring it to the new guy who doesn't know anything.
Yeah, you're right. And I remember when I first went on a date with Tom, on the first date, he was just like, of course you find Brad Pitt handsome. He's like, I find Brad Pitt, I want his abs.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't you? And it almost gave me then permission, because before that I was in a toxic relationship where the guy literally would lose his shit when the time I had said, oh my God, Brad Pitt's so handsome. And I'm watching Fight Club and I'm just sitting with it. And imagine in a movie, you're watching a movie and they lose their shit. So that was why I then retreated, right? Because I learned bad behavior, or I learned the behavior was, don't say another guy's attractive, otherwise you're going to trigger him. That was a learned behavior. But then when I met Tom, who was very secure, there was like, of course. So that then gave me permission to actually be honest, and then realize if there's 7.5 billion people in the world, do you really think out of everybody, he's only going to find me attractive?
Exactly.
And here's the beauty that I find in this discussion is that if you think about it, maybe there's a billion people he finds attractive, but we're together. He chose me. Now, of course, it goes both ways. There's that many people and I chose him.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty. That's the beauty in the relationship. Even though you find other people attractive, you still choose to be with this person.
Right.
And
because
that's
there's so much more than that.
Yeah. And everything we're talking about with confidence and resilience and just like how to hold your own and stand on your own, you've told me in the past that you've got backlash about your plastic surgery. So how have you, if you don't mind, how have you dealt with that? How have you dealt with that as being confident and not taking it to heart, or really showing up? You did a whole video about it.
Yeah. I thought a lot about it because basically, you know, I had scheduled getting a nose job like 4.5 years ago, and then COVID hit. And it was in New York City, and it was like, you know, everything shut down. So I postponed it. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to do it at some point. I like called them. I'm like, do I still have I paid for part of it, right? And so it's like, I still have, they're like, yeah, you know, whenever you want to come in. I kept putting it off. And then we started acquisition.com. I decided I wanted to make content. And then it was like two things happening separately, which is like me not realizing, oh, I'm making content now, and this is like a whole different thing. And then me being like, yeah, let's schedule that nose job I wanted. And I scheduled it. And then I'm like, I remember like afterwards thinking, oh shit, what's it going to be like to like make content after this? Because like I also have fake boobs, and like nobody knew me when I got those done, right? So it's like, it doesn't make a difference. Like nobody knew, right?
It's the change,
it's like it didn't
notice,
happen, right? Right. And so this time around, I thought to myself, I was like, okay. At first, I was just like nervous. I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm just gonna get such shit on. I was like, what would a woman that I would feel is worthy of being respected and worthy of having the attention of these people do? It's like, I look at it like I'm earning people's attention every time I make content, and they don't have to give me their attention. I don't deserve it. I'm earning it by putting out valuable things. Like I do something, I say something that is of value for people. And so I was like, how could I turn this into something that's valuable for other people? And I was like, the only way that it is valuable for other people is if I talk about it. I know people who have done things and not talked about it. And I think a lot of like celebrities, for example, like they don't, and it just kind of like shows up, right? And you're like, is anyone gonna say anything? And, you know, I thought about that as an like I really did. I was like, I just don't want to have to talk about, because I talk about business for the most part. I don't even talk about appearance. But like, I actually then think it's been like this really great opportunity because one, I decided I want to talk about it because I don't want other women to feel shame if they want to do that. Do I say I'm an advocate of plastic surgery? No. I'm an advocate of like, do whatever the fuck you want to do. And so if you want to get plastic surgery, I don't want you to feel bad about it, because I am not into shaming people on any decision they want to make, right? Like if you're not hurting somebody, what do I care? And so I was like, I think that's what I need to do, is to just be open about it, be honest, talk about what I did. I think that's the only way that I can turn this into a net positive for myself. And so that's what I did, is I basically, like, when I got the surgery done, I took pictures, and I took pictures every day. And I ended up also getting a brow lift. So I went in for a nose job, and the guy was like, you would look really good if you did brows. And I was like, I was nervous. I almost said no, because I don't want to get more done that people are going to see. But I was like, I want to do it. So I was like, I'm going to do it. Like, yeah, throw it in, you know, because that's just kind of how I am. I don't care. I was like, if it looks good, it looks good. It's been really interesting because I have actually gotten so much more support from women than I expected, because I've been honest about it, and because I haven't tried to hide it, and I haven't tried to make it a secret. And actually, most of the people who have said anything negative have been men, which I found odd. But I have actually found so much freedom in doing it, because I think that when I make content, like, I talk so much about business that I actually have primarily, like, more than half my audience is men. And I think that I realized, like, I don't talk about any of the other stuff that is like who I am. You know, like, I don't talk about like fitness or my marriage or my, like, only if asked will I talk about those things, right? Like, this is not even the type of podcast I'm usually on.
I know.
I'm usually on like all business. Like, I was like, here's my topics. You're like, I don't really know if someone else apply. I'm like, okay. And I think that if I want to have more of an impact on people, they need to know who I am 360, not just through business. And I think this opened up that lens for me of seeing that, and seeing an unexpected positive response to me being honest about it was actually very encouraging. Of course, there's people who say very mean things. I was like, oh my God, that was awful. Like, but more than not, people have been very supportive. And I really just think it's because I'm being honest. Like, the one commitment that I've made making content is like, my only goal is that I am who I am, no matter what that means. Like, if people don't like that, I'm still going to say it, because it's who I am. And at the end of the day, I think that that's the only way I can, one, continue to make content. Because if I feel like me, Leila, on content is not who Leila is, I just feel, ugh, like, I hate that, you know? And I think in the beginning I was so nervous. I was like, every time I watched it, I was like, ugh, because it didn't feel like me. But now I think it's like, if I'm sharing who I am and what's my truth, even if people don't like it, even if it's not their vibe, as long as it's me being truthful, that's all that matters to me. I just want to be honest and transparent in a world where I feel like everyone is trying to not be. You know, I'm like, show me without makeup. Show me 2 weeks after surgery when I look like shit. Like, I literally, like, watching the video, I was like, I look so bad in some of these shots. Like, so bad. You know, and even some of them when they're capturing me, there's so many things I see that I don't like. And I just, like, I literally just, like, I'm like, I know this is good. Like, I close my eyes and I'm like, put it out. Because, like, it will help people. And I know if I do it enough times, if I take the action enough times, I eventually will feel good about it.
That's so strong, because there's so many moments in that story that you could have just said no because of the judgment that you would have gotten. And it's so relatable, not even just with plastic surgery. I've never had any, but the relatability of not doing something you really want to do because you're so fearful of the judgment that may come with it. I think every female can freaking relate to that. And so having a North Star of, as long as I'm honest, as long as, were you reminding yourself why you were doing it? Like, this is for me?
Yeah. I just kept thinking to myself, if I don't figure out how to make content and be completely transparent with the world about who I am, I just won't keep making content. Because I don't, if the representation of Leila on the internet is not who Leila really is, then I don't feel like I'm accomplishing my goal. Because I actually think that how I came off, even the first like year and a half in content, is way worse than what I'm like in real life. Like, people who know me well tell me that. We were at dinner the other day, and my teammate was like, he's like, when I watched your content, I thought you were just a bitch. And I was like, oh. And he's like, and you're like so nice and funny and empathetic. And I'm like, oh my God. So I have just made it my goal. Like, if everyone who watches my content can see me the way that everyone who knows me sees me, like, I just want to bridge that gap.
Yeah, that's so important. You even said, like, this isn't your usual interview because we haven't really spoken about business. And I was really debating. Now, here's the thing. You're so freaking good at business. And I love talking about business, right? Like 85% of my life is actually revolved around business. How do I grow the YouTube channel? What's the algorithm saying? What's the team? Are they happy? Where's the management? Like all of this stuff. But every time I always come back to the reason why, part of the reason why I think you're so freaking successful and how you were able to go from where we even started, right? Where you were overweight, drugs, alcohol, arrested, to be the person you are today. I really think it's because of what you've done to your mindset. I think if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't have the confidence, if you don't have resilience, if you don't know how to set boundaries, you're not going to be able to survive in business.
Yeah.
And so that was why I think it's so important to really I wanted to extract everything that Leila was behind the scenes so that if someone looks and it's like, I want to be successful, not even successful, I want to make a change in my life.
Yeah.
And that what does that mean to them? They have the tools in order to do it. And whether that's business or not, you can then show up with the tools that you need to keep moving forward.
You're right. I mean, it's true. Like, our first business grew so quickly, and people are always like, what's the secret to success? But it's like, don't look at what the person's doing today. Look at what they did years ago. To build who they are, to actualize the success. And I think that's, I say it all the time. It's like losing the weight and getting out of that point in my life was probably the hardest thing that I did. The second hardest thing was starting the company, but it was easier because I'd already done the first thing.
Honestly, homie, I've so freaking enjoyed this conversation.
I have too.
Really giving everyone the tactics and tools that you've used in order for you to be able to change your life and show up today like a freaking badass. So where can people follow you and everything that you're doing?
Go to my podcast is Build on iTunes, Spotify, all the platforms. YouTube, Leila Hormozi. Instagram, Leila Hormozi. Twitter, Threads. It's just all at Leila Hormozi.
At everywhere.
Yeah, just my name. Yeah, type it in.
Keep watching to learn how to never, ever get pushed around again. You are such a freaking badass. Ugh. Honestly, I surround myself with a lot of amazing women. I'm very fortunate like that. But you, every time I think about a woman who can stand up for themselves, a woman that doesn't give excuses, a woman that doesn't allow someone to push them around, you're like at the top of that list. And what I would love is to actually start with the story where Snoop Dogg totally disrespects you and ignores you.
Well, it wasn't just me. So I want to give him, I have to just set the tone. It was a room full of a lot of Hollywood type people. It was one of his first meetings at the company I was working at the time where he'd just become a client. And he was testing everybody. And that's really what it was. And he walks into this big, old kind of bankers type conference room with the big, brown everything, and he had on a purple fur coat, I'll never forget this, and he sits at the head of the table and turns his back to everybody. And that intimidated a lot of folks in the room. And instead, I'm just looking at my watch. I was like, all right, if this is how this is going to go. And then it was my turn. So the NFL / Yonkers in me kicked in, and I just banged on the table, and I was like, hey, I was like, over here. I'm like, you're busy, but so are we. And if you don't want to hear what we have to say, then that's cool. Let's go on with our day. And it was like a movie scene, from The Godfather, where the chair slowly turns, and he was almost like, who's speaking to me like that? And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and we've been together ever since. A little more went into it, but it was just one of those, I think, defining moments for me, for him, and I think it was 2 days later, a call went into my boss at the time, and they were like, we want the girl from the NFL running the team. And I was like, wait a minute, I am not a manager, and this is not what you hired me to do. And they said, you are now. So you're on the road. Go meet him in Reno, Nevada. In 2 days, you're picking him up and you're taking him to New York to go start press for, it was either Starsky and Hutch or Soul Plane. That's how long ago this was. And I never forget, he did the Chappelle Show. And I just remember sitting there in awe of both of them, just knowing I'm watching greatness. And here we are, almost 20 years later, embarrassed to say, and he and I are producing a movie called The Underdogs for MGM and Amazon, and we're taking off for Atlanta to go knock out a 2-month shoot, and it's my first feature film, so off I go.
Okay, there's so much here, because right now, I don't know how aware you are of that moment potentially being a huge pivot. And it becomes these moments in so many of our lives where in this moment of potential you even said intimidation. It's freaking Snoop Dogg, right? So in these moments, there are these moments where you can choose a path. And one is allowing your emotion to take over. Oh my God, he's so intimidating. I better stay quiet. That's how I will be accepted here, is like sink into the background. Don't rustle any feathers, you know, be in the shadows, and then I can keep hopefully working. And then there's other moments like you where you're like, no, I won't be intimidated. I won't allow this to affect how I show up and who I show up to be. And you lent into that. And as a result, to your point of what an amazing story that 20 years later, you're now producing just incredible stuff with him. But that moment of deciding, I will not be intimidated. I won't let somebody, and you even said the whole room. He wasn't just like that to you. It was to the whole room. Now, other people don't have that story now where they get to work with Snoop Dogg. They have the story about how once they were in a room with Snoop Dogg and he turned his back on them. But you have the story of he turned his back on me and I didn't let that stop me. Talk to me about that thing, that superpower of yours, because if we can help people at home who are listening right now to cultivate that mindset and that belief in themselves, homie, think about the knock-on effect we can have with other incredible women.
It's so true. And you know, I hear it more and more from a lot of young women, but also just a lot of my peers in their 40s and 50s that are like, you have to keep speaking out and telling your truth because it's a movement. And I think you remember this, like you were probably the first podcast I ever came on. So thank you for that, because you got me out of my comfort zone. So I might sit here and, you know, be badass and tough, but we still all share the same insecurities. We still all share the same, you know, dilemmas. And so I always like to just make sure that it's not a general kind of just decision to make, because you have to know the room. But so much of it is instinctual, and so much of it is, I just don't give a fuck anymore. Like, honestly, like I've been in the background far too long, which is my own fault, and I'm gonna say fault. I blame myself because there was no one holding me back except myself. And that's something that I think young women today probably don't have the same fears we do, because of your book, because of your podcast, like everything you're doing for young women. And if I can just help change the path of a couple, you know, women here and there, then I feel like being here with you today, it's done justice for myself and for those that come behind us and those that walk beside us. And I think that's an important note that we all have to address. But I'd love to sit here and tell you, well, you know, I've taken these classes and I've done these studies. A lot of it is just self-help and work and meditation and working with, whether it's your energy healer or it's psychiatrist or psychologist or your shaman, like whatever it is that's going to help you get outside of your comfort zone. Or maybe it's just your girlfriends, or maybe it's a great business partner in Michael Strahan and Deion Sanders, my husband, Mike Marini. Like, it's okay to lean on men. I think sometimes, you know, feminists or, you know, whatever you want to call women that are standing up for themselves, we think we can't lean on men. And that's not true. Like, if you have the right partners, both personally and professionally, they will lift you up without it seeming like it's their duty or their job. It's because you've earned that place. And sometimes we all just need that little extra kick in the ass to get in front of where we need to be.
So first of all, you said you realized it was you doing it. That is actually really beautiful, because it's such a, like, literally juxtaposition where you're like, yeah, I did stand up for myself to Snoop Dogg. I told him to pay attention. Like, I'm not here to waste my time being that person. And yet, years later, you sit with me and you're nervous. You're, you know, it's, you said getting out of my comfort zone. So I think that is beautiful, but yet it's also confusing, right? To say, okay, you have, if I'm going to be just so crude, you've got the balls to stand up for yourself here, and yet getting out of your comfort zone still makes you nervous.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you process getting out of your comfort zone to go after that thing when it still makes you nervous? Because that's the key, right? That people are listening to. It's like, well, if she can do it, I can do it too. But how?
Oh gosh, I wish I could say there's this great formula. It's not. I have a strong team around me, and I think that's key, is surround yourself with people who support you, who will lift you when you need to be lifted, but also you know, there's a saying I've heard, I'm going to back that up. It's called, we lift as we climb. Now, if you think about that, if you're climbing and you're not taking people with you, what's that journey worth? It's not. But at the same time, I might be lifting, I need those people to help climb with me. Can't do it by yourself. And for those that I think do it by themselves, it's a lonely climb. So surround yourself. And I'll give you like a real example. I just got more active on my social media because it'd be like, all right, let me post here or there. Everyone loves my 9 to 6-year-old mother. That's easy and fun, and my dog or my husband and my friends. But I very rarely would post about myself. And so Scott Schmertz, who heads up social media at Smack, he said, it's time. And I was like, what do you mean it's time? He's like, we've got to start getting you going. And you're so great at it. You.
Oh, thank you.
I'm saying you. And like, you've been a big inspiration for us both. And that's what it is. It's like, I just have to go for it. And you know what? If somebody unfollows me because they don't like what I'm saying, I don't care. Like, I'm not making money off this. I'm not doing it to try to go get a brand or make money. I'm doing it truly because I want to not just help others, but also help our business and help everybody that works at our business. So you just have to think about how you can help others by getting out of your comfort zone. And that, I think, will lead you there. Because when it's just about yourself, I'm speaking for me.
Yeah.
Let me just be clear. I'm not knocking the people that are doing it for themselves. But for me and what you do, like, we're doing this to help others. Like, and that's what gets me through it. And will I watch this podcast? Somebody's going to make me from my team. I know it, but otherwise, I normally won't watch what I do. I can't read my interviews. Like, I get very uncomfortable just doing it. But everyone's like, but you're, whether it's what we're doing with Coach Prime in Jackson State and the whole HBCU movement, or again, it's my 28-year-old Corral who's running the Strahan business at 28. I didn't have someone when I was 28 doing that for me. So I feel very strong that I need to do this for her to help her. So when she's my age, hopefully she's running the business and has a whole team of young women that she's trained, that she found when they were college interns like I found her.
People right now are like, oh my God, she's so badass, you're so confident. And yet, even as you're talking, it's like you have this confidence air about you, and that at the same time, you'll be open about where you're not confident. And to have that duality is very difficult, where you can give yourself grace in moments of, you even said, right, like, I don't know if I can watch myself. And it's like to be the woman that can stand up for yourself and, you know, hold your own around very, very powerful men. It's like, oh my God, you're such a badass, and yet, oh my God, you're not confident here. It seems like a duality, but I think that special sauce is what makes you you, and I think you've called it like the confidence roller coaster that you're always on. Talk to me about that confidence roller coaster, because I think it's so beautiful to talk about, because people at home, I think it's enlightening to know, hey, look, you don't always have to play at the A game. You don't always have to feel the confidence to keep showing up.
Right. I watched a TED Talk, probably, I don't even know when it came out, 11, 12 years ago, Brene Brown, and it was about vulnerability. And a friend of mine sent that to me, and it resonated so deep and so hard, and that was a defining moment in my life that I realized I don't have to act tough all the time, and that vulnerability could be one of your superpowers. It's okay. And I never have a problem saying, I need help. Never a problem saying, I don't know, let me find out and I'll get back to you. And those are two very basic traits that if more and more people would just do that and say that, I think we'd waste so much like less time in a meeting, in a project or whatever. Just, it's okay to say you don't know. Like, I'm really good at what I know, but I'm even better at what I don't know. And I surround myself with great lawyers and publicists and agents and analytical experts and, you know, fashion people or whoever it is. It's okay to say you don't know, and it's okay to be vulnerable.
How on earth are you able to show up like that and have such conviction in the uncertainty?
I don't know any other way. It's how I grew up. My mom was an older mom, which I didn't know any difference back then, but she later told me a story that when I was born, she was 43 when I was born, and this is 1969. So the nurse was having her sign my birth certificate, and when she gave her age, they said, what? They said, no, we're gonna knock 10 years off your age because we don't want your daughter to be known as the kid with the older mother. How crazy is that?
Oh my God, that would never fly now.
Is that crazy?
That's insane.
And she's still alive, and she's healthy, and she's my role model, and she's 96 now. And my parents were together, but my dad suffered from mental illness. So I grew up in uncertainty. I didn't know who was coming home, right? Like, There were some days that he'd be on the high and he would just disappear because of the drugs and whatever else he was doing. And then he'd show up on our doorstep in tears, a puddle, and the depression would hit, and he'd be on the bed for a month and wouldn't go to work. And I'd, Mommy, what's wrong with Daddy? And she'd cover for him. And then when I hit high school and it escalated, there was no more covering. And the uncertainty, like, just, it was how I grew up, and I didn't know any better. And what I did learn from my mom had the smarts to send me to a psychologist back then at 14. And he said to me, do you hate your father? And in that moment I said, yes. And he said, and that's okay. He said, and don't let anyone ever tell you different. And it was then I realized you have a choice to be not a survivor, but a thriver, or you can be a victim. And I could have gone down either path and just followed his footsteps and just drugs and been I don't want to say a loser per se, but a loser in the terms of like not striving to just stand on my own and have this independence. And I said, I'm never going to depend on anybody. Like, that was just the decision I made, which might have gone a little too far, as my husband will tell you, because it's really hard for me to like not always be so independent. I didn't get married till I was 46 because of that independence, but it's what suited me. So the uncertainty is just all I know. And I think that for me is something I work on now, that my husband and my clients and friends all say, it's okay to let go. It's okay to sleep. It's okay to breathe. It's okay to lean on us. And that's something that I every day have to work on.
Wow, how on earth do you do that? Especially if you've built up your independence. I 1000% agree that in these moments, people have that decision of you either repeat the habit of your childhood or you pivot in the opposite direction. You say, this isn't going to be my life. So building your independence is beautiful. I see you as a badass freaking independent woman. And at the same time, you sit here and say, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to lean on men. It doesn't mean that you're weak. How are you able to hold those two competing ideas in your head? Because, dude, I'm so with you 1000% that if we can really figure out how you can navigate the two, I think so many people will benefit from being able to be like, oh, I can be a badass. I can be independent. And yet, when I need the help, the right thing to do is to lean on the people around me, and that doesn't make me weak.
You have to lose your ego. That's the very first thing.
How the hell do you lose your ego?
For me, it was, whether it was, the boyfriend breakups where you have to, one of my best guy friends, Todd Shamarian, I'll never forget this. There was a heartbreak that I went through, and he said, you don't care that this guy broke up with you. It's your ego. And I was like, damn, and I had to think about that. And I was like, he's right. Like, that was the wrong guy for me, but it was because he broke up with me. And it was in that moment, I was like, going forward, is this real or is it about my ego? So it's just a life experience, and you need that friend that's going to just remind you of that. And I've used that with other friends where I say, this isn't about you, it's about your ego. Now, the work ego, that one, especially when you have the celebrity partner that I have, and this isn't him at all, but it's a show we're producing comes out. Michael Strahan's Smack Entertainment is producing. And for years, I just roll my eyes and let it go, because it's like, it's not about me, it's about the business, it's about the show, it's about the company. But then we hired a PR firm, and they're like, no, this is your company. These are your ideas. Yes, he's the celebrity, and yes, he's the clickbait, but Michael's also the first one to always pull me into the picture, close enough because he knows if he doesn't have his arm around me, they're going to cut me out. So it's a great team member in that sense. But I had to come to terms with not making the most powerful woman in sports lists, not making this list in the Hollywood Reporter, not doing that, and just say it's not about the work I'm doing, that's my ego. It's not easy. I'm not going to sit here and pretend it didn't hurt for a long time. But as our company grew and our businesses were taking off and our shows are getting nominated and we're doing more in the documentary space and we've got non-scripted, OccuFollow shows coming out and working on this first feature film, I'm good. I don't care about your fucking lists anymore. Don't call me for them now because I'm so good. But what I am doing is I'm getting my younger team on those lists. That's what I asked our PR firm, because no one was looking out for me in that sense. So now I want the 30 under 30s, the 40 under 40s. I want them on those lists. So keep me off, put the team on.
Is that then just a thinking about what am I focusing on? Is my ego more important than my goal? Is that what you're saying? Because
Yes.
I think that is so powerful, and I think that in framing it like that, I do that a lot as well because I have the ego as well. So like even doing this show, I'm like, I don't want to get in front of the camera. And it's like, why don't you want to get in front of it? Oh, because what if I mess up? And it's like, oh, but Lisa, if your goal is impacting people and you're not getting in front of the camera because you're worried about what if you mess up, what if people tease you, you are putting your ego first.
Right.
And I think that there can be so much beauty in just being honest. Because here's the thing, if you chose to put your ego first, it's your life. Right. Like, it's got nothing to do with me. If that's the thing that you say, I'd rather feel better about myself in the small time, in this moment, than to think about impact or whatever that goal is, at least you're making the decision for yourself. And now you're not waking up every day saying, well, I wish I had this over here. No, you wake up every day saying, I chose to put my ego above my goal.
Right. And I believe you feel the same way. The only person you should be competing against is the person you're looking at in the mirror every day. And that's it. And we're human. I'm not going to sit here and be like, I never worry about the ego. Damn straight. But it's now become a more conscious, I think, journey for me to say, let me separate this so I can focus on the task at hand and what's the most important.
That's so amazing. Also, have you read the book Rocket Fuel?
I haven't read that one yet.
So to your point, like I used to really struggle with the ego. When we first started Impact Theory, I was so proud of Tom being in front of the camera and I was helping behind the scenes, and then it ended up being over time, right, like Tom's amazing. And it wasn't that I needed my name like specifically, but the recognition that there is a foundation that he couldn't do what he did unless I showed up to do what I did. And it was really hard, like the whole ego thing, even though it was, cause I was even more torn because I'm like, it's my husband. I want him to do well. Like, I'm so happy that people are giving him the accolades. But that little ego sting was still there. And I read the book Rocket Fuel, and what it does is it breaks up. Look, you've got the rocket, the big shiny thing that everyone stares at, right? Michael Strahan, Tom Bilyeu, my husband, right? Like, it's larger than life. Then you have the fuel that if the fuel isn't there, the rocket doesn't do anything. The rocket doesn't move, the rocket doesn't progress, the rocket just stays there. So the fuel to the rocket is actually even more important or just as important. But no one cares about the damn fuel.
Right.
So I realized I was the fuel, my husband was the big rocket, and actually I need to find value in knowing how valuable the damn fuel is. Not have other people tell me how important the fuel is, but me know how important the fuel is. I want to go something that you said earlier again about like you chose not to be the victim. That is so powerful. And yet it's so hard to do. Because sometimes when some things happen to you, you have every right to. You have every right to say, this really sucks. Why me? This shouldn't be the way life is. And yet, I've heard you say so many times, there is no room for shouldn't, or it's not fair, or if. No, it's when. It's how I show up. Is that a stacking stone mentality that you've done over the years? And then if so, how do you start to keep, or how do you keep building on it so that it doesn't fracture when someone comes to try and like break it?
People try to break it daily. I mean, let's be honest. I said to Strahan or Coach Prime, Aaron Andrews, any of our clients and friends, I just want to wake up one day and not fight. Every day there's a fight, whether it's a fight to get a return call, a fight to get a show on the air, a fight to get the announcement of the show that took us 1.5 years to sell, a fight to get this product in the stores, a fight to say, why can't we get this category? Like, whatever it is, it's always a fight. And when I say fight, because I know everybody takes things so literal, I don't mean we're MFing people and we're yelling this. It's just, it's a constant battle to move the ball forward. And I believe that when you hit a certain level of, whether it's your career or just how you operate, how you vibrate, that's what it's going to be. Because the minute I become complacent, I think you don't care anymore. So that's probably where I'm not going to be the victim comes into play. It's because I hold myself to that higher standard, which then energetically attracts the same like-minded people. I'd like to think that everybody at SMAC and that's attached to us, you know, peripherally all vibrate at that same level, that we're all trying to move the ball forward. And it's the outside factors that are trying to kind of intercept the ball, not to get too football term here, but that's what I know. And it's a struggle to just sometimes breathe and say it's not personal. And I think that's a big part of it. We always say show business isn't called family business. It's called show business. It's a business. And you have to take that step backwards and just remember, this isn't personal, and just recalibrate. And you're going to get knocked down a couple steps, but then tomorrow when I get up, I'm going to go that extra step to make sure that we're moving forward. And that also takes you into that, you know, realm of when is it okay to let something go? Like there's a show we've been developing that after the 4th iteration, I just looked at the team and I said, I think the universe is trying to tell us it's okay to let this one go. And it doesn't mean we did anything wrong. It just means this wasn't the right one. And let's put our energy in something that we know we really can focus on and win.
How do you do that though, in those moments of like, because the last word I would ever relate to you is quitting. And at the same time, you have to let go, right? You have to kind of move on. And so many people hold on to that means I'm a quitter. How do you make sure that you don't? Because obviously talking about like the ego and stuff, there is a bit of that I can imagine that seeps in. It's like, oh God, is this just like, is this because we haven't pushed enough? Is that because we haven't like given this enough time and attention? How do you know when to make that pivot and not take it on as a reflection of who you are?
I don't look at it as quitting. I look at it as letting go. I think that's a really important definition, to just understand that if it was after the first try, it's a quit. But if we've gone back to the drawing board and said, all right, let's shift this to try this, you know, let's shift to try that, and we keep sitting down and keep trying, it's not quitting. It's knowing it's the wrong time, it's the wrong project, it's the wrong idea. Maybe we pick it back up in a year. We're doing that right now. There was a project we took out before the pandemic and it was passed on. But someone called me and it's like, hey, da-da-da. I'm like, I was like, find this treatment. And like, they dug it up. I said, let's freshen it up. We're taking it back out, because I let go at that time, but I still believe in that and I'm taking it back out. A lot of it is instinctual, your gut, knowing the marketplace at the time. And look, we're in an uncharted territory. We've come out of a global pandemic. There's war going on overseas, which is impacting so much of this happening here. There's inventory issues. No matter what business you're in, it impacts everything you're doing, personally, professionally. So those are factors you have to take in and then make your decision. So I don't look at it as quitting. It's just truly analyzing everything and saying, let's take our energy and our efforts and put it over here, because we know that one needs more attention than this right now.
This so remains, but how do you make sure that it's not about you? Like, and the reason why I ask that is I find it difficult myself sometimes is not taking things personally. That's the thing that you were saying, right? Like, you don't take things personally. And in these moments, I'm always kind of thinking, is this because I'm not good enough, or is it because the project isn't good enough? Like, because separating those can be a difference between knocking your self-esteem and stopping ever progressing, or going, oh, okay, I can learn from this and now I'm going to move on.
I am great at the business. I'm great at representing our clients. I'm great at representing the projects. I suck at standing up for myself. So maybe that's a little bit where the work that I have to do a lot more of. When I'm in my zone for the business, for a contract, for a show, no self-doubt there. I just know it's not the right project, or we've tried, or this or that. But if I have to stand up for myself, it's everyone around me that has to come to me and say, you've got to da-da-da, you've got to da-da. So
We've got to keep breaking this down, girl, because here's the thing. I'm sitting here so wide-eyed because I can't believe you said that. And at the same time, so many people are like that. So many women are like that. I wish I had this stat on hand. I've got a bad memory, but it was something like, most women are 80% more likely to fight for somebody else that they know than they are to fight for themselves.
You have to wonder if that's part of our hormone makeup, our genetic makeup, and how we were raised. It just, I'm an older person, I'm young here and here, but the bones are in their 50s. And I spend so much time talking to the 20 and 30 somethings, say, don't be me in that area. Be me everywhere else, but don't subscribe to not feeling good enough, not feeling like you belong at that table. And it was not probably until my 40s, late 40s even, where I was like, you know what, there's no seat at that table for me. Well, fuck you, I'm building my own table.
How did you get to that point then? Because if we can ideally identify, hopefully people, because I'm the same girl, it took me to like my late 30s, 40s to adopt this idea and this feeling and just saying, well, fuck it then. If we can like bottle it up and give it to the 20-year-olds, like it would just save them so much time. What do you think happened between the person that was like looking for the seat and now the person's like, I'm going to fucking bring my own seat to the table and not wait to be invited?
Because there were years I didn't have the seat and I just got sick of it. And then an opportunity, would present itself, or I'd be in a meeting, whether it was Michael or Dion or Snoop, that they're looking at them and they're talking to them. And the guys know full well, it's my, brain, it's my project, it's my this for them. But they're the ones just, and to their credit, they would always kick it over to me. And I was just mad and angry. And then at that moment would come where, whoever it was would say, well, Constance, and at that point I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, did you say something? Because you just like, and I stopped taking those meetings. And it was a process. It just took time. And again, it took the guys around me, which is what I go back to earlier. It's okay, to lean. And they lean on me. Why can't I lean on them? Because it's always helping all of us together. That it was just opportunity or just incident after incident that I had enough. I just had enough. And that was really it. And also, I do have to really, I know my husband doesn't think, I see it. I have to shout him out because he supports me so much and really has just been there. And Mike, I mean, he's a very masculine man, very successful in his own right, who had this whole big life before me in a different way. And then coming into my life, he likes to say he's never thought he'd be so emasculated or that his wife would have a bigger penis than him. But with that said, we both support each other. And it was new for me to have this man constantly lifting me up, picking me up off the floor, because there were things that had happened, whether it was a lawsuit that just took everything out of me emotionally and took a lot of my confidence out of me, that he'd come home and I'd literally be laying on the floor crying. And he'd come home and she's like, you got this, you got this. And it was those moments that I learned I could trust somebody. And I'm not saying everybody needs a man. I don't want people to walk away like this is the finale of Sex and the City and like, I don't need a man. I don't need a partner. That's not what I'm saying. It was just, for me at that right time, the right guy came along and he taught me to trust. And that was really, really important for me.
I really want to drill deep here because there's nuance to everything you just said. Being a badass, being a woman who can be independent, hold her own in business meetings, not feel like now she has to, kowtow to other people, like being able to lean on men. But when it comes to relationships, it really is a different ball game because the heart is involved. Did you and Mike ever have an issue in regards to what an alpha you are? How did you navigate that? Because a lot of people would be intimidated by it or feel like they have to dull their alpha to make their partner feel more valid, let's say.
He knew what he was getting. I mean, that's just the bottom line. We were lucky. We were introduced by mutual friends, so we'd known of each other for years. So he was very aware of my career and everything going on. When we first started dating, I just started Smack. So it wasn't easy for him, or for me, I guess, in that sense, to get with somebody in your later years who's really starting over, because it started the company from the kitchen table and you're just grinding and hustling. There was always just an ease with us when we met, which was different than every other guy I dated, because they'd all act like, oh, it's so cool, you manage Snoop, or you're so cool you work with Coach or Dion or any of these, Tony Gonzalez, like all these Hall of Famers. But then once the time came that you're at dinner and 11 o'clock your phone's ringing, I'm like, I have to take it. Now, I'm also not full of shit. Like, everything's great. marriage is hard. Any relationship's hard. And it is especially hard when you have two successful career people. And mine is a different world than the tech space or the finance space. Like Hollywood, sports, it is different. It is, and we're not done at 6 p.m., right? Like the phone's ringing all night, it's gone, you know, so I have to learn boundaries. I have to find the time to say, okay, we're gonna go to a dinner tonight and I'm gonna leave the phone in the purse. I don't do a good job of it. Like he says, we go to bed at night, I kiss the iPhone goodnight. I wake up, I kiss the iPhone good morning. I've tried to get better. It's, again, a very hard work in progress for us both, but I never have to worry about any competition between the two of us. It's just knowing the ebbs and flows and respecting one another and the boundaries. And also, as an only child, I like my alone time. I didn't have siblings I had to share a room with or, you know, talk to all the time. So that's another piece of it. There's, on top of being a crazy workaholic, I do like to settle into my alone time. So it's a constant work in progress.
Thank you for being that honest. And do you ever take that, like, do you have to ever navigate your personality when you're around, when you go from business to personal? And what I mean by that is, for me, when I'm in business mode, you're dealing with a lot of problems. You said it earlier. It's like, oh my God, like shit hits the fan every 2 seconds, every which way you look. And so when that happens to me, I have to toughen up. I don't want to say I dull my emotions, but I put my emotions aside so that I can try and be clear-headed with business decisions. The problem is when I then go from like grind, don't take no shit, Lisa, have your own back, you got this, like, you know the intense meetings that you end up getting in, and then you go home. And then I'm with my husband and he wants to be all soft and I'm just ball and knot. I've had the discussion with Tom where he's been like, you're bringing your hardness into our relationship and now it's becoming a problem in our relationship. Have you ever had that? How do you navigate that?
I was going to ask you for tips. It's
Really,
hard.
yeah.
How do you do it? I still don't know. It's as long as you're honest about it, you vocalize it. I think that's all you can do. It's see the issue, address it, and work on it. Nobody's perfect. And I think anyone that pretends it's all perfect, they're full of shit, right? It's work, but it's work that I can't imagine living my life without him. So it's worth it. And for us, the pandemic actually brought us closer because we both traveled so much that on March 12th, 2020, we hunkered down in our house out here. And for those 2 years, you were together and it was just sort of like, there were moments, right? But it was time that we never had together, ever in our relationship. So as awful as the pandemic was, that's something I'm forever going to be thankful for. Playing Rummy Cube, playing backgammon, walks when we were allowed to be outside. Just those things really brought us closer together and really strengthened our relationship.
Yeah, God. In those moments when you get tested, that's what makes you stronger. And with the male feminine, however you want to like word it, with Tom and I, we were very honest with each other. And so Tom, because I started as a housewife with him, he said that he missed the softness of the wife he first married. And because I went into entrepreneurship and I had to develop grit, because as we were building Quest, I was surrounded by 40 employees and let's say 70, 80% of them were ex-convicts. Because we were the companies like, we don't care, what your background is.
A beautiful thing.
Who do you show up to be? Are you willing to work hard? And if so, we'll give you a chance. And so here I am in situations where I have to toughen the fuck up. I have the choice. Let them push you around. Not that they deliberately are going to, but either let them do it or you toughen the fuck up. And so over time, I started to get harder. Just my personality got harder and I wasn't taking any shit and I was standing up for myself and I wasn't allowing people to push me around. And I brought that home. And as I didn't realize, and as I was bringing it home more and more, the thing about me and Tom is we're always very honest with each other. That's the promise we have.
Right.
Like, say the damn hard thing, but be honest.
Right.
And that was the hard thing where he's like, look, I know you're finding yourself, you're finding your strength, you're finding your independence, seeing, this is what he was saying to me, seeing you stand up for yourself and feel like this badass independent woman, he's like, is beautiful. And at the same time, you're bringing so much of this hardness home. I miss the cuddly, warm,
Right.
partner. And so I had to really assess that, and I had to come up with tools and tactics for me to be able to shift. So to be able to go from how do I show up, be a badass, rock it like Constance, and then how do I unwind and be a softie. And when I say a softie, I love to feel like that as well. It's not like doing it for the other person. And it all became like my armor, my clothes, I realized. So taking my jewelry off, taking off my high heels, putting on my pajamas, I would wipe my makeup off, tying my hair back. I realized was a transition for me from work to then going and hugging Tom. But I had to go through this transition before then I could talk to him and have that like softness. And so these are the things that I'm so fascinated in talking to, especially women like yourself, who has a thriving relationship, but is very open about these are the difficulties of having both.
Yeah. It's funny you said that about the transition when you come home, because I do that, but I never realized subconsciously that's probably the same thing. The minute I come home, I say hi, and I go upstairs, and I put my sweats on. And obviously we're going out, but if I'm home for the night, it's like sweats. Let's go walk the dog on the beach. Like, let's just try to have a moment, put the phone down, those kind of things. Get through a meal without being on the phone and just focus, how was your day? Like, what's going on? And it's also different because, we didn't have kids together. He has kids. But those are all things that you just really have to be aware of and discuss and be open to. Like, we have this beautiful blended family. He's got 2 kids, and then we have 2 bonus kids who are our niece and nephew who lost their parents, that there are kids now. Tori's actually getting married, which we're so excited about in the next few weeks. And it's a beautiful thing that people always say, is it so hard that you didn't have kids? And I look at them and I say, I have kids. I might not have given birth to them, but I have these kids. I have my SMAC kids. I have the kids that worked with me, whether it was at the NFL, whether it was at the firm, that are now all going on and doing their own thing, that I look at them and I'm so proud of them. And I know it's a reflection of what I helped build a foundation for. And that all goes into this because there's enough room for all of them. But at the end of the day, you've got to make room for your partner and you have to make room for yourself. What do they tell you on the airplane? In case of an emergency, put the oxygen mask on yourself first and then the other person. And we always forget that. And it's such a simple concept that put the oxygen mask on.
How are you so open? That's beautiful. How are you so open to invite and change your life as you got older? Because this is one thing that I hear a lot from my audience is, the one thing that I'm just as big fan of is like, guys, don't settle. Like, you are a freaking amazing person, and don't settle for anything less than what you deserve and that what someone's going to bring to the table as additive to you. And so I'm really fascinated of these like badass women like yourself, where it's like, what did you meet Mike and decide to have a full-time, like a marriage later on in life because you chose not to settle? Like, what was that thing that you had later in life? And how are you comfortable enough to let someone in as you start to get as we get older, we get a little more dogmatic in how we think, how we show up, who we want to be. So how are you able to actually let somebody in and not make a mistake? Or maybe you did make a mistake earlier in life with being with the wrong partner.
Oh gosh, I made tons of mistakes. Are you kidding? It was like the old kiss the frogs to find the prince. I kissed a lot of bad frogs. It was, A, I didn't want to settle. And B, I was okay being by myself. That was always what it
You've always been okay with being by yourself.
Always.
Does that stem from being an only child?
I think it stemmed from, trauma is the first word that comes to mind, but it's not a word I like to use. I think it's the trauma of the way everything went down with my parents and just, with my dad just being so manic, just didn't know what was going to go on, that I was like, I'd rather be alone than ever be in a situation like this. And I fell into some bad relationships, unavailable people, and all the things. And then I just loved my career. It's one of the things, it's not work if you love it. And that doesn't mean it didn't come without struggles, of course. I don't ever want to think like, oh, you had this like easy breezy career. No. I don't want the message being taken away. But at the core of it, I always loved what I was doing overall. Yeah, there's day-to-day bullshit. So I was able to throw myself into it. And in my early 30s, when I moved to LA, I was traveling the world, whether it was with Enrique Iglesias, you know, Kelly Clarkson, and then Snoop. I mean, I saw the world with him, and I'm so thankful to him for that. To have gone to Russia, which I know I will never go to again, to see Australia, New Zealand, and Africa, and all these places while he was touring and giving his gift to the world, that I loved it. I was immersed in it. Yes, I dated here and there, but they weren't the right person. I knew it. Might have been fun at the time, but there was too much just like while I was building the business side of it, that when I got with Mike, I didn't think about who texted who, who's calling who. When people would tell me when you know, and you roll your eyes, you really know. It just was easy.
And was that a big part of it because he kind of he accepted who you were?
Yes, because we laugh about it. We had this, whirlwind romance. We were long distance, but as the relationship started getting more and more serious, the people in my life were like, wait a minute, you have a serious boyfriend? What's going on here? And it was, all right, let's go out with Michael. Let's go out with Tony and Toby. Let's go out with Dion and Tracy. And then it was Snoop and Shantae. And I know it sounds like, oh, well, you're just dropping famous people. And I don't mean to do that. These are core people in my world that were very, very protective of me because they were my friends before they were my clients. So that's why those are the names I'm choosing. Yes, there's all my college girlfriends and that crew, of course, like your ride or die. But from the friendship business side of it, Mike was like, I don't really give a fuck who they are or what they do. If these are your friends, these are your friends. And that for me was like, he's the one.
Oh my, that's so beautiful. So many people that I know, as they get older, they become more dogmatic about this is my life, and it becomes harder for them to choose a partner because they're so picky. And then also the worry that you've built yourself up to be who you are today, right? Like when you're working on yourself and you're really working on your confidence and you're working on your career and you're working on not being a victim and you really do try and show up every day, there really does become that fear of like, is this person going to take me backwards? Am I going to accidentally give over to them into this relationship and then lose myself? And so when I think about you and I think about your career and I think about your relationship and how beautiful, you haven't lost yourself. And that's something that is so powerful and very scary for a lot of women. And I know that so many people worry about that. They don't get into a relationship because they're worried that they're going to revert back to either who they were when they were younger, or that the guy is going to impact how they see themselves and their confidence that they've built.
I had those relationships and I realized this is not the right person. So it took a lot of trial and error to get here. And there's something to be said. I'm not the same person that I was at 40, at 30, at 25. A lot of my friends married their college sweethearts, and that is a testament to them. I cannot even imagine being with that same person because I grew so differently. So the fact you can find somebody and grow together, it's so beautiful. And even though I got with Mike later in life, we're not the same couple we were when we started dating. We're better. And that's what every relationship should be. Whether you're guy, girl, or they, them, you want to be with the right person that you can grow together, not apart.
So true. All right, I'm going to take us back to something you said earlier.
Okay.
And this is a bit of a touchy subject that may rattle our audience up. I'm actually not sure. It's not a subject I've really spoken about yet.
Okay.
So we talk about showing up, working freaking hard. The motto of your company is
Hustle like you're broke.
Hustle like you're broke. And I don't know if you've heard the recent somewhat controversy around the phrase quietly quitting. Have you heard of this phrase?
I literally saw it on, I think it was the Shade Room the other day. And here we go again. I'm probably going to rattle some cages. I don't understand this generation with the big resignation or whatever it was called, and now this quiet quitting. What does everyone think is going to happen if we all decide not to work? That's just what I don't understand. I grew up, I started working at my mom's flower shop. when I was in junior high school, maybe even younger than that, I can't remember, cutting thorns off roses. Think about that. That's like so symbolic, right? I never really said that.
That's so true.
It's not like I wanted to be there, but I had to be there.
Yeah.
You were taught a work ethic. Like my grandfather on my mom's side came over on a boat from Greece through Ellis Island. My mom lived through the Depression. My dad worked at the transit authority, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., was a Korean War veteran and struggled with so much of that. But what they instilled in me, as did my whole family, you work and you give back. And whether it's to an organization that you have a connection to, or whether, from some of my family, it was the Greek church, you work and you give back and you're a contributing member to society. So I don't understand this generation that thinks that they're just going to sit home and not do anything or phone it in at a job that somebody owns. Whether it's a huge conglomerate or whether it's Smack Entertainment, we've worked for everything we have, and we're doing our best to offer a place for you to contribute and work, and we're very open and we listen, and when we can, we will concede. For example, when everybody was coming back to the offices, that was very important for us because we are a creative, collaborative company. Working on a Zoom doesn't work for us. And I said, I can respect your feelings. If you feel you need to go find another job where you can work from home, I will help you. But if you're going to work here, it is in these offices, we are together. But the compromise, because Michael and I take pride in listening and trying to work together, is we let everybody work from home on Fridays. Is that something he and I want to be doing? No. But given the way the world has shifted, we're trying our best to compromise and get the most out of everybody. But this quietly quitting where you're phoning it in, I don't understand it. I just don't.
Yeah.
Look at me, I'm like digging in. I don't get it.
Girl, I want you, so here's the thing. So in case people are listening and not actually quite sure what quietly quitting is, there isn't like one succinct definition, but I pulled a company just to kind of explain it to the audience. Quietly quitting is about rejecting the notion that work has to take over one's life and that employees should go above and beyond what their job description entails. According to Metro, this can take many forms, including turning down projects based on interest, like, no, I'm not interested in that. Sorry, don't want to do it. Refusing to answer work messages outside of work hours, or simply feeling less mentally and emotionally invested in the role. So it is the antithesis to what I was brought up to do. Being Greek Orthodox like yourself, having a father that came from nothing, a tiny village in the mountains of Cyprus where his toilet was a hole in the floor. That is my father. That is literally the next generation. So growing up, my dad always taught me, and he went from that to move to England, taught himself, and ended up running one of the largest oil tanking shipping companies. And so he literally said to me, growing up every day, do not expect anything to be given to you. If you want anything, you have to be willing to work harder, period. If you don't work hard, you don't deserve it. And so having that idea, having that mentality, I've worked very hard in my life. Now look, at the same time, I recognize where working hard can be detrimental to your health, right? So where is that fine line? And I feel like we're on this pendulum where we went really hard one way and now we've swung so hard in the other way that it is not only detrimental to how people show up, but I really do worry as women where we fought so damn hard to get equality, to be seen in the same light of like, what do I bring to the table? And now maybe we're encouraging them to like, put your foot off the pedal, like to just not do much, to expect things. And I'm really freaking worried about it. And I was like, Constance, we got to talk about it, homie, because like, I'm really worried about where this leads to people's mental state of what they think, how they can show up and how to be a badass. Like if you just expect to be tough without putting in the work.
I contribute a lot of this to everybody wins a participation trophy. When I played sports as a kid, you win or you lose. The winners got a trophy and the losers, okay, next year. But this generation, I see friends' kids or the grandkids or whatever, everybody got a trophy. Why? Why? How does that prepare you for life? And I want to address one thing that you brought up. I don't want anybody working themselves to get sick. So that's not what we're talking about. But we've created an environment, whether it's at our office or, you know, people that we work with or the partnerships we have, where I like to think you're offered the benefits or the salary or just the learning and the culture that you want to exceed and you want to be a part of it. But if I ever said to a boss, that project doesn't interest me, bye. There's no such thing. So I'm trying hard to be understanding, but at the same time, there's a business to run. And without the business running, the money doesn't come in. And if the money doesn't come in, not only can we not pay people, but we can't give them raises or bonuses. So I just don't know where this disconnect is, that people don't understand that if you don't show up and show out, what do you think is going to happen? Seriously, like, what do you think is going to happen? I talk about it all the time. Erin Andrews, who's a client, a partner, and most importantly, a friend, we started Wear by Erin Andrews together.
Which is the jacket that I'm wearing. Literally, you took this off your back and gave it to me before we got on set. How amazing is this?
It matches your outfit so much better. But we are a startup, and we are tiny, but we're mighty, and we grind, and we hustle, and we just announced that we have our women's sports line announced with Major League Baseball this summer. That doesn't come to us. No one's calling us saying, hey, here's the league. No, we have to fight for it. And Erin might be on camera, but off camera, she's a badass. She is showing up at these NFL stadiums with bags of clothes, and she sees fans in the stands that they're screaming for her, and she's handing product out. She's doing whatever it takes, as is everyone on our team, to build this tiny female-owned business that, yes, there are people that are giving us an opportunity, like Michael Rubin at Fanatics. The sports leagues they give us the opportunity. That's it. Yes. It was up to us to show out. If we all were quietly quitting, this business would have been extinct already. It'd have been done, and we're only 3 years old and in the middle of the pandemic and dealing with inventory issues, all the things. But whether it's the generations or our parents, how we were raised, everyone on this team busts their ass every day, the weekends, because don't forget, sports is 24/7, 7 days a week. Everyone's showing up. Maybe it's because of the culture we have, I'm not sure, but we all believe so much in what we're building and what we're doing that it's not a job, it's truly a passion. And there's other people that actually said to me, the gift that you're giving. I was like, what do you mean the gift? They're like, you've answered something for women. Women don't want to wear a big oversized jersey or be bedazzled. I shouldn't say all women. There's a market for that. Yeah. And there's already a huge supply of that. But for women like us, for example, I wanted to support my team, but I didn't want it, blah, blah, blah. Like I wanted to wear something that I could wear out to dinner, to the bar, but also show up at the games at. So that's a gift that we feel we're giving to women. And it doesn't just happen every day, whether it's our partners at 5-Star designing new lines on the weekends, this, that, making sure there's something that's out there. It's a team effort, but the reward is in seeing someone like you rocking that because you just liked it and wanted it. And it makes me so happy. And I can't wait for Erin and the team to see this and know, like, you're our target audience and you got it and it worked. So don't quietly quit. Find the right job that you don't want to quietly quit. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know, but you've got to be a contributing member to society, or I don't know what that becomes. I didn't major in anthropology or sociology, but I'm sure the studies on this are going to just be mind-blowing.
God, so the reason why this is so important, and you just literally laid it out, I live in a world that is not in the world that I wish it was. So I wish as women we could show up, do the same amount of work as a man, and it be taken as equal. And the truth is, it's not often like that. And I actually have a quote of yours that I'd love to read. The main challenge was what a lot of young women still face. Guys getting brought in above me because they have connections. That happened 3 times. Instead of quitting or giving up, I worked 10 times harder. It put the battery in my back. So if now you have to show up to work 10 times harder, and now the message out there is quietly quit, I'm fucking petrified.
Petrified. It's not going to work. It's going to backfire, and the ramifications will come years and years and a generation from now, because I don't want any man or woman, but especially a woman, to lean into this. And then 2 years from now, bitch, because that's what's going to happen.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so true.
Wake up. Figure out what, if you're not happy there, there's so many opportunities, there's so many new industries and so many people willing to help and lend a hand. Reach out, ask, find it, take it. Get the help when you need it. It's not what we're saying, but to just sit home and watch bad TV, get your ass out there and find something you love to do and do it.
Yeah, I love that. And then also just the power of words, right? Like there's a reason I lean into the word badass on purpose. In saying it out loud, I feel like a badass. In saying it out loud, I feel like I'm like, yeah. Right? So like, I find that word very powerful. And so I use it in every which way where I want to either motivate someone else or motivate myself. Now think about what the word quit is doing. Or even quietly. It's not right, like you're a freaking force, homie. So like you come into a room, people know Constance is there because you're a force. There's nothing, I think this is a compliment, there's nothing quiet about you. And so I really do worry about the word quiet, that we're encouraging women, and I'm just gonna like focus on women for now because that's kind of where in life, that's where I focus on. But like that we're encouraging women to be quiet again instead of standing up for themselves. And then also we're encouraging women to quit when sadly right now it's hard to get noticed even when you're working 10 times as much.
All of what you just said. They need to read your book, Radical Confidence.
Thank you.
Seriously, but that's what it's about, is radical confidence. Find it. And again, I'm not saying it's easy out there, especially for a struggling single mother. We're not sitting here with our pink pillows and acting like, oh, like, go figure it out, sweetheart, as I drink my martini. No, like you and I started at the bottom, now we're here, and we're still fighting and still doing something every day. But you can't quietly quit. You cannot. I can't stress it enough. And I also truly believe, as miserable as a job may be, try not to quit until you find your next job. You're way more valuable when you have a job than when you just decide to leave and it takes you 6, 8, 10 months to find the new job. The world is back. We can't use this pandemic as an excuse anymore. Business is operating. The world is open again. Figure out what it is that you want to do. And there are job counselors, there's job fairs, there are places to go. You just need to find somebody that'll just take your ear and listen. At least once a week, you could ask my team. This week, I think it was twice. But I try to do something with somebody, either in high school, college, early 20s, to just give some guidance. Whether it helps or not, I have no idea. But if someone asks, I'm going to do it. Same thing should go for any woman, any man, but any woman that wants to reach out to the field that they're trying to get into. I was doing a lot with an organization called MVP, Emerging Veterans and Players. And there's one woman, I don't want to say who she is, but she asked if I would mentor her. And it was my honor to do that. So find a mentor. People want to help. It's instinctive to us, especially as a nurturing woman. We want to help. So find that mentor in the field and see what they can do. It doesn't mean they can give you a job, but at least they can put you on a path to get there.
Oh that's so amazing. I love that you do that. And as I was saying, I know you so well that I so admire the woman you are, your badassery. Does anyone find you intimidating?
I try not to be intimidating because I don't think I am. So it's hard to try not to be when you already don't think you are. That probably makes no sense whatsoever.
It actually makes perfect sense. And that's why I asked it, because you don't feel like you're being intimidating. And there's this really weird fine line that I'm kind of obsessed with to talk to women about, between the fine line between confidence and people are like, oh my gosh, she's so confident, I want to be like her, and then arrogance, where it's like, oh, look at her, she thinks she knows everything. And it's so damn fine that it can be very detrimental, I think, to the person. So for me, as I was building my radical confidence, I was like, I'm freaking petrified all the time. I'm insecure all the time. So building my radical confidence was very hard for me. So then I get more and more confident. I adopt more and more of the behavior, the mindset, the tips and the tricks that I know how to show up. And so I become really proud of the woman that I'm becoming. And as I'm becoming more and more of this confident woman, people are now perceiving it, or I've been told, as arrogant or intimidation. And I'm like, it's actually really difficult for me, because I don't want to be intimidating. But this is very bothersome to me because I can say the exact same thing in the exact same tone that my husband can say it, and they will look at him going, "Oh my God, what an alpha," and then they'll look at me going, "What a bitch."
Yeah. I live it every day. I don't even know what to say.
How do you swallow it and keep going?
It's probably a lot of my neck and back pain from swallowing so much. It happens all the time. I think it's getting better. Let me start by saying that. I do believe it's getting better because of the work you're doing, the book you wrote, your podcast, me coming out of my comfort zone, and a whole bunch of other women that we respect and admire, podcasts we listen to, because the 20-something-year-olds are hearing that message and finding their way at 25 versus 35 or 45.
Yeah.
So I'd like to think that our discomfort is helping navigate the younger generation. But how do we then help the people closer in age to us? Because it's never too late. That's a message I always want someone to get across. At 53, I had no idea this is 53. When I was 23, 53 to me meant, oh, you're about to retire.
Geriatric, yeah.
I'm just getting started. I'm just getting started. So I do now make a conscious decision in every meeting, in every conversation that, and it's always a guy who's like, okay, you're being emotional. Not to either choke him out if we're in a room together or reach through the Zoom or the phone and choke him out. Because I know I'm not being emotional, and that's his problem, not mine. Can I do that every time? No, I'm working on it. I've gotten much better about it and realizing this isn't my issue, it's their issue. And if they want to perceive me that way, then perceive me that way. The second time they say it, I then tell them if they want to see dramatic or emotional, I will bring it because I know the difference.
Do you really say
yes.
that?
And that's when they usually kind of catch themselves. That's a trick that I started doing.
That's so powerful. And you've used that because you realized it bothered you. You felt like...
Minimized, marginalized, whatever the right word is. Pissed off is my fucking term.
Yeah,
Pissed
but
the
it's
fuck
their way
off.
of trying to silence you,
Correct.
right? And obviously then when you feel silenced, like you almost, like at least for me, I kind of process it because I'm like, I really want to defend myself now. But then even in defending myself, they'll be like, oh, see, I told you she was emotional. And you're like, you want to bring the next...
It's ridiculous.
So I love having a strategy like that because in those moments I need something to go back to, so I don't get overly emotional.
Right.
Like I need a line,
a trigger.
like a trigger, like a line. Like okay, when he triggers this, or maybe even she, when they trigger this, repeat this line.
Right.
Because I think that using that is a real cop out. Like, oh, you're just being sensitive. Like it is a cop out for someone to throw at you. But yet sometimes what I'll do if I get that, I try not to be so dogmatic, and I go, oh, are you sensitive, Lisa? Like, I'll almost just ask myself, because the ego can also step in.
Right.
We're like, don't you fucking tell me that I'm
Right.
too sensitive, right? And so now you're like, well, who do I want to be? I want to be the person that always learns and grows. And can I be too sensitive sometimes? Yes.
1000%.
So acknowledge in
Right.
these moments, but then also to your point of like, what is their intention? Their intention right now isn't to actually help me and be like, look, you're a little sensitive right now. Their intention is to shut me up. Their intention is to marginalize me, minimize who, what I've just said.
And you're right, it's women too. I mean, it really bums me out the more and more women that you meet that aren't leaning in to try to help and feel the need to put you down to lift themselves up. That's got to stop.
Why do you think that is?
Insecurity. And I just learned with them, they're not people I want in my circle anyway.
Yeah. Dude, you are freaking fire. I could talk to you forever. Where can people find you? Where can people find this new clothing line that, guys, check this bad boy out. I'm going to do a little,
spin.
I'll do a little spin for you people.
So we have this one in all 32 NFL teams, and it will be available on Fanatics and NFL Shop. And we also have our NBA line, our NCAA line, and we just now launched Major League Baseball.
Click here right now to learn how to gain respect, speak up, set boundaries, and hold your ground.
But what's our choice? What is the other
To
choice?
back off, to actually
To fold up,
to
go
fold
away.
up.
I'm not, if I was to sit across from you and say I've never done that in my life, that's a lie. We always do. We sometimes fear gets the best of